Well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us, and welcome to the ITA Continuing Education Best Practices for Division I Dual Match Referees. My name is Darren Potkey. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm talking to you from Marietta, Georgia, home of the Big Chicken, one of our big landmarks here. We got a pretty big class, almost as many people as in the British House of Commons, I think, signed up for this webinar. So we're going to give it maybe one more minute to allow some folks to jump on. If you do see those exact words that I said with the incomparable, as we like to call him, Relaford Sanders, focusing on something there, the mic or the ball or something, what he's doing in the chair, you are in the right spot. We'll be back to you in about 60 seconds. Okay, again, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us. Welcome to Best Practices for Division I Referees. My name is Darren Potkey. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm talking to you from Marietta, Georgia. And I do have a couple other folks on the line helping us tonight with this particular class. Sharon Wright from just down south here in Griffin, Georgia. Sharon, good evening.
Hello, everyone.
And then we have Steve Laro from the great state of New Hampshire, Live Free or Die. Steve, good evening.
Good evening.
And a very dedicated man, Relaford Sanders, who's actually the chief of the Daytona Beach circuit event this week, but he's jumped on with us tonight. Relaford, thanks for coming on and good evening.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Okay, we'll go back here one slide. We'll just do a quick webinar basic. I know a lot of you are very familiar with this program because you've used it a few times for either certification or continuing education or classes or what have you. Remember, there's a couple different ways that you can interact. One is by typing a question in the questions box. Sharon, Steve, and Relaford will be monitoring that, and we'll be responding to you accordingly. You can also send a chat message via the chat box, although please try to do questions in the questions pane and leave the chat box for comments. Or you can certainly virtually raise your hand. By doing that, you click on a little palm in your GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side. That virtually raises your hand, and when we have a little break, we'll have some time tonight throughout this for questions and discussion. We will go ahead and unmute you. If we do that, please remember to unmute yourself. One other thing to point out here, there are a few handouts in your Handouts tab in your control panel. The first one are these actual slides in PDF form. We also have a copy of the emergency rule change the ITA just came down with, which all of you, of course, hopefully were notified of, adjusting the bathroom procedures. The verbiage of that rule change language is in a PDF document, and as well as a document that Steve Laro actually primarily prepared, referee procedures preparing for dual matches, which is excellent. So those are three handouts. If for some reason you can't access these or don't see them or having problems downloading, as soon as we're done, go ahead and shoot myself or one of us an email, and we will send that over to you before hopefully our eyes shut tonight for bed. So those are three handouts that you got. Again, I think most of you are familiar with this program, so we look forward to your interaction tonight, and we are not keeping participation score. We do have a pop poll here, and it's the first of our pop polls that we'd like your opinion on. We're going to ask you from the list I'm going to put up on the screen momentarily, go ahead and pick the best quality that you feel of a good referee. The best quality of a good referee. And our options here are kindness, knowledge of your crew, communication skills, positive attitude, and perfection. There might be one or two more that are not on there. This is not an exhaustive list, of course, but give us your opinion on what you think might be the best attribute or quality. And then Sharon, are you not singing during these, or I thought we had talked about that? I will take the silence as a no. Okay, we got about 87% of you that have given your opinion, so we'll try to get to a little over 90, give you about 10 or 15 more seconds. Thanks for your participation. Okay, we will go ahead and close that and share those results. And Steve Laro, the interesting part is when I look at the outline the ITA staff created, it says, while there isn't really a wrong answer, we are hoping that communication skills will be a popular choice. So it appears that this group agrees with that. Would you agree with that, Steve? That a significant quality of a good referee? No, you got yourself on mute, Steve. Okay, Sharon, would you agree with that? That communication skills is an important quality?
Extremely important.
Is there anything else on this? I mean, they're all good responses. Is there another one that jumps out to you?
I would say having a positive attitude and really knowing your crew.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfection. We all make mistakes. I mean, my wife's already told me I made 3 today, and it's not even 7:30 tonight. Of course, that was before 7:30 this morning. So none of us are perfect. We know that. But no, that was good. I think that's exactly kind of what we were hoping those results would go. So good job, everybody, with that. Relaford, any comments on that poll, or Steve?
I'm sorry, Darren, I'm back online. I was trying to answer a question for somebody else and seemed to be
That's
locked
okay.
up, so I apologize.
That's okay. My question to you is, communication skills. Would you agree that that's the most important, or do you want to make an argument for something else on that list?
I wouldn't make an argument for something else. Communication's always your best avenue, whether it's dealing with players or coaches. It's all going to deal with how you present yourself to those individuals, and even though they may not present themselves to you in a proper manner, it's up to you to make sure that you get your message across. There are several ways of doing it, but first and foremost, you want to do it the easy route, and then if it has to escalate, then so be it. But it's all about communication.
Yep. Excellent. Relaford, anything to add or any comments?
No, I agree. I think communication is the number one, and like Sharon's answer or emphasis on knowledge of your crew when it comes to assigning chairs and knowing who you have to deal with, and then the strengths of your umpire.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys' comments on that, and thanks everyone for participating in that. And as you see on the screen, there's some other qualities that you see. Knowledge of the rules. I think some of you might have been interested in why wasn't that one of the 5 choices. It's probably the top priority of referees in terms of a thorough knowledge of the rules, particularly the ITA rules and how certain situations apply. It's interesting. This year, our ITA test was changed a lot. It wasn't as long. I think hopefully a lot of people appreciated that, but it was much more about application of rules rather than just simple, if this happens, then you do this. As we know, it's as important, if not more important, to know how to apply those procedures and rules than your actual knowledge of the rules. We are role models and mentors. People are looking up to you, taking what you're saying very seriously. So please always be conscious of that. You are a leader, being a referee of not just your crew, but of the school, of the conference you're working. You've been put in a leadership position. Certainly need to be a team builder and have a real good passion for the sport. And a positive attitude, of course, doesn't hurt anyone. It's almost a necessity in order to be able to. And I'm sorry I didn't hide that screen. So there you go, guys. I haven't done one of these in a while. I got to get back into the mode. But you see on your screen some of what I just talked about. So leadership ability and passion for the sport is very, very important, and a positive attitude. We have one ITA official out there that is pretty vehement, and one of their famous lines is "Work where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated." Okay, let's move on to the new bathroom break rule that came out, an emergency rule change at the ITA convention. As you probably remember, one of the changes we had this year that certainly raised some of our eyebrows was the fact that the Division I men were copying the Division I women's bathroom procedure, in that they were allowed one extended break, which is up to 4.5 minutes on a changeover, up to 5 minutes on a set break. In the past, only the women's Division I had that procedure. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. I know you're the referee of Tulsa. The word on the street is there were a lot of extended bathroom visits or requests on changeovers late in matches or at critical times in the match. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, and that's what brought a lot of this to the forefront. Not so much the bathroom break itself, but the extended time because of the locations of the bathrooms to some of the outer courts. And I mean, there were 6 and 7 minutes for the bathroom breaks. So that's where a lot of this has come from. I mean, under the old rule, we had to adjust and provide the additional travel time to any bathroom break. Now that's been eliminated, and I think for the best.
Yes, plus you also had to make a determination whether it was gamesmanship, and you certainly could have, disallowed a bathroom visit request at 5-4 in the second set or 5-4 in the final set. But as we know, on the officiating side, sometimes we're on a little bit of thin ice, or we might be jumping to conclusions about something. So yes, it certainly did happen a lot, and that was an individual tournament. So obviously everybody on this webinar knows that the dual match season, the temperature tends to be a little bit warmer. So probably it was going to happen a lot more or have some more issues with the dual match season. So the ITA, of course, now has changed this. Remember that the Division I men and women still get the one, whatever I guess the term is still extended break or extra time break, but now they have to take that on the set break. There is no more changeover extended time. There also is no more provision to add travel time to both changeover and set break bathroom breaks. Remember, we still want to use some good judgment. We don't necessarily want to penalize the players for having to wait for points to be finished on other courts before they can actually exit the court, depending on the facility, the gate structure, what have you. So, keep using the good judgment everybody on this webinar has been doing. Remember that now if a bathroom break is needed at any time other than a set break, if the player has a medical timeout in their pocket, they can use that, or they have to use it for a medical timeout. Now the difference now, and last year, if a men's Division I player wanted to use the bathroom for the purposes of their medical timeout, you would give them the 3 minutes quote unquote treatment time, or the 3-minute medical timeout time that they would get, plus any travel time. Now the rule allows that player to take up to the 5 minutes on that. So that is a little bit of a nuance just to be very familiar with, is that they do get the 5-minute extended for the medical timeout purpose to take the bathroom break. So, in plain English, no more extended changeover breaks. They get one extended break only on the set break. The player can still, go to the bathroom on changeovers. They're basically on their own time once the changeover time is over. So you're probably not going to see that much, but it could happen. and just use good judgment about the timing of this. We don't want to penalize players based on the facility layout if they have to wait. For example, at UCLA, if you're on the middle court in the stadium, you physically can't get off the court till at least the point next to you on either adjacent court is being played. So we want to be reasonable about when we start that clock, but not be completely unreasonable. Sharon, Relaford, or Steve, anything to add on that before we maybe open it up for some questions or comments? And I'd like some of the people on the webinar tonight that have already done some tennis this year. We've had a few matches last weekend. Maybe this scenario came up and how you handled it, but we'll start with Steve, Relaford, and Sharon. Anything else to add on that or any comments?
Everything went fine down at Florida State. No problems, but of course the bathrooms are close, so that's not an issue with time. Most of them were back in 90 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, the same thing in Miami. They seem to already get the rule that they can only take that bathroom break at a set break. So, it's getting out there. Coaches understood it.
Yeah, and Steve, real quick before you jump in, a lot of the players that come from the ITF junior circuit, this is what their rule is. There is no quote-unquote bathroom break on a changeover. So they're already doing that. So that might be one reason why this transition might be a little bit easier if those players are coming from the ITF junior circuit, because that's what the procedure is. So I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. I've received several emails over the last couple of weeks and phone calls asking for clarifications on a couple of the issues on bathroom breaks. But instead of answering them, I'd like to see if the individuals outside here online have the same questions or seeing the same issues with the way it was written before I get into it. I'm just curious.
Sure. So if anybody has a question, or if you've done a match this last weekend and had to handle this scenario, go ahead and raise your hand or type your question real quick, and we'll call on you. I mean, I know it is early in the season, so. Oh, Donna Jerome. Donna, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Hey, Donna.
Hey, Darren, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I was just wanting maybe some guidance about, how Auburn is laid out really difficult as far as bathroom break goes. In the past, we've never even started the clock until they get out of the courts, around, and almost up the hill, if you remember how it is there. Sharon might have some good guidance for me on that situation. So, because it's a huge difference from, say, court 6 and court 5. Chris, Roger, and I were talking about it, and maybe not starting the clock until they got down there near court 5. But then that's really travel time. So I'm kind of stumped about what to do.
Yeah. Anybody else want to take a stab at that or a comment? I mean, I'm happy to jump in, but.
Actually, I don't see that she's got much choice because of how far the bathrooms are away.
Yeah.
But the only thing is actually most of the time those players used to be back when several times, used to be back within like 3 or 4 minutes. But it does take a long. They gotta hustle in order to get back and forth. I've had players that take almost 10 minutes at times.
Yeah, especially like court 4 and 6 that are so far away. Like I said, I'm kind of stumped about what to do, but if I don't do anything, there won't be any change from what we did last year, although we really did not have any problems other than, and I think this would be solved with only the set break and only one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, remember, they used to only get one extended anyway, but you're right. Now being the set break, I mean, there's a lot more, I don't want to say acceptance, that might not be the right term, but less anxiety from the opponent and the opponent's coach or coaches if the toilet visit is taken on the set break. They're still going to you're still going to have to manage it and not make it into this long extended thing, but it tends to not be as big of an issue unless it was on a changeover. I mean, Donna, would you agree or?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I was thinking just so it would be a change is maybe, starting the clock, and Sharon would understand this more than anybody probably, as they make the turn going up the hill. And then also the question I had on the indoor courts, Sharon, they have to go all the way down if they're at the other end. Maybe not starting the clock, but in the rule it says we can adjust that time down. So like not starting the clock till they got down near court 1, but only giving them 3 minutes to get in and out. I was just kind of looking for some guidance and what flexibility I had.
Yeah, no, I agree. So obviously there is a provision in there, and I know David Harrison might have said something here on the chat about it. There is something I believe that says that it's the up to 5 minutes, which implies that you as the referee can set less time for that. I guess you have that ability. I'm just gonna be frank. I'm not sure why you would go there, unless it was, literally the bathroom was
right
next door.
Yeah, but
because remember, remember you have to treat all the courts the same. So that's why, in the past we've always measured potential bathroom break travel issues from the very furthest court from the bathroom.
I got you. Yeah. So
to me, you shouldn't. I mean, again, this is just me, and I'm happy to have someone take a contrary opinion. You should not have 6 different bathroom times or 3 different bathroom times based on the court that they're leaving. Number one, that's hard to explain and get everybody on the same page. That for one, that's just difficult and kind of illogical, to be honest. So, but I'm happy to have somebody take a contrary opinion on that.
Would it be the same from when they came out? I don't
Donna,
know.
Donna?
Yeah, it seemed like it would be the same from the court that's closest to the bathroom.
Donna, this is Steve.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if a coach says to you, the rule is up to 5 minutes and that's it? What are you going to do then?
I don't think a player can.
I've heard you saying you're going to start the clock at a gate. You're going to start it on some type of hill. What are you going to do if the opposing coach says, I don't care what you think. The rule says 5 minutes. What are you going to do then?
I don't think a player can get to the bathroom.
That was not my question.
Yeah.
My question to you as the referee, if the coach says the rule is 5 minutes, what are you going to do?
I would say, Coach, it's 5 minutes from the starting, from where the.
And where, if he says to you, where is that written? What are you going to do then?
Well, all you guys keep saying, use good judgment. That's what
No. There's nothing about good judgment in the bathroom rule. My question to you is, what are you going to do if the coach says it's 5 minutes? Let me tell you where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I would like to know.
We have too many officials out there interpreting the rules for themselves. The coaches have written these rules. We do not. And I'm just giving you some feedback that I've received from some D1 coaches that I'm going to be dealing with here shortly at the Blue Gray. And at the Blue Gray, we do have some bathrooms that are a little bit further out. But the rule is that. And as one of the coaches said to me, who's on the D1 operating committee, we wrote the rule for a purpose. It was sent out to the coaches and they all signed up on it. So why would an official determine they know better than the D1 operating committee? So with that, let me say, I am going to use up to the 5 minutes. If the player can't get back in that time, then they're going to get timed. It's not us to determine what the coaches are doing. And I certainly do not want the coaches taking and going on to the ITA website and filling out one of those forms and saying that the referee, because they determined they were going to have all these extra time for bathroom breaks, their decision affected the outcome of the match. Now, yes, there is some growing pains here in some of the rules that have just come out, but that's for us as officials to be reporting it to the ITA and saying, this doesn't seem to be working. The coaches aren't happy with this, and let the rules committee deal with the D1 operating committees or the D2s, whatever. But I would tell you right now, I'm uncomfortable with hearing you say, or any other official, well, we're going to start the clock at the top of the hill, or we're going to start it over here and over there because this is what I feel comfortable with.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and certainly that's a viable position. But at Auburn, that's almost impossible. So, that's going to be difficult, Donna. I think you just got to figure out, encourage those players to really hustle, gate to gate, whatever you got to do to get them back within as close to the 5 minutes as you can. There are a couple facilities out there, and just so everybody on this webinar knows, our officials committee has informed some of the ITA folks. There are a few facilities out there where this is completely impossible. Cal State Northridge is one of them. It's completely impossible. The players are going to have to go in a bush or pee into a can.
And Darren, we have one up here in New Hampshire, the same thing. And the coach asked me about it, and I said, Coach, you're the one that needs to deal with your representative.
Yeah.
The other one to deal with this. It's not us, because if we bend the rule for you, then we're going to be dealing it for everyone else. And those that were at the All-American last year know how that worked out. Didn't work out too well.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So, no, good question. I mean, it's kind of like demonstrating absurdity by being absurd. We might have to do this for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl Davies has his hand up, guys. I'm going to unmute. Hey, Daryl.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. All of this discussion is centered around either not or modifying the timing from the point of departure from the court or up the hill or out the gate or whatever. And that's a reasonable scenario. But what about when you are in a facility, for example, an indoor, where there may be a problem with access to the restroom itself? That is, you may start the clock when they leave the court and say that's just the way it is, the hill or otherwise doesn't matter. But when they get to the bathroom, in fact, they can't get access for whatever reason.
Yep.
Another event going on there, whatever. And so you know that, of course, as a referee on court. They come back to you, though, late. And you say, okay, you got a time violation or whatever. They say, well, there was nothing available. All the stalls, all the urinals, whatever, were taken. How would you handle that?
Yeah, well, that could happen, and especially in public bathrooms, which a lot of these are. I mean,
Right.
You got, and I know where you reside. I mean, there's a pretty significant hill going up to the bathroom. If everyone's familiar with Kalamazoo, I haven't stepped it off yet, but I'm planning to this May.
48 stairs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you can give the player the benefit of the doubt there.
Okay, because it's not a travel time issue. Really
Yeah.
isn't a travel time issue. They're leaving the court on time. They're hustling up there, but when they get to the bathroom, again, they may not have access, and you don't know, say, because you're on the court. So okay, so it's just totally discretion then. I mean, whether I'm going to believe.
This doesn't happen at the professional level because generally speaking, a line umpire, whoever goes with the player. Of course, they have
Right.
different timing rules anyway, so that's probably relevant.
Sure.
But here, there's no one that could really verify that was
Right.
actually the case.
Okay.
Sharon or Steve or Relaford, any comment on that? It's a good question. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
going to
think
happen.
Yeah, I think the 5 minutes is where we start from, and if there are extenuating circumstances, then I think we just need to deal with that on a as needed basis. Some venues you just can't get there, do your business and get back within 5 minutes, and we just need to take that into account and be reasonable.
Yeah. And to Steve's point, you know, a little history on this. A lot of the men's coaches, at least the ones I've talked to, you know, they were not really interested in adding travel time or whatever, and that's maybe why their rule was what it was. So that's why it was a little bit of a head scratcher that when the new provision came out that allowed them an extended one, because the discussions I've had with a lot of the coaches, that really wasn't anything they were interested in. So generally speaking, the coaches aren't really interested in adding a significant amount or any time. Of course, they have passed a rule now that a player can get one to extend and get up to 5. But I think to Steve's point, we start extending this left and right. It's going to be a slippery slope. Although, again, I will say, I'm talking out of both sides here. There are a few facilities out there where it's physically going to be impossible to do this. So I think what our job is to note that, to make sure that the ITA staff, professionally, respectfully, when there are issues with this, know and follow the procedure as best we can and try to make it work. Any other comment on that? Anyone want to raise their hand or another comment? I know Vern just raised.
There was a
second.
question.
Okay. Okay.
There was a question that came in.
Yep.
Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
They'll ask if both coaches set the travel time if they agree on it. So if they agree on something else other than 5 minutes, can they do that?
Well, let me say this, that no coach has the authority to change a rule. They can change a procedure, but they can't change a rule. And this is a rule. This is where it's going to be difficult for all of us to enforce it, but we're obligated to enforce it. We can certainly start giving some guidance to the rules committee and saying this is not working at certain schools or at certain universities. It's physically impossible for the players to get there. But I think we're the ones that have to provide the information and not change the rule and let the coaches or the D1 operating committee aware of the situations, because let's face it, they're probably not aware of all of the schools and universities that are out there. But again, I would have assumed, and I probably shouldn't assume, that the coaches at these other facilities who know that 5 minutes is not going to work should have spoken and said something. But right now they've sort of handcuffed us, and I mean, we just have to deal with it and help them change it, because that's part of our job out there as a referee, to see problems and say, you know, this is not working. We may have to revisit this.
Yeah, good point, Stephen. And to me, it's like a lot of the ITA changes that come. I mean, the players will eventually adjust and get used to this. I mean, a lot of us were like, oh, we cannot believe they're not going to warm up. Well, it took the players about 2 matches to adjust, probably to not having any sort of a warm up in a dual match. Players adjust to formats, players adjust to new procedures. So hopefully in this case, they will do that as well. Vern Weber. Hey, Vern, I just unmuted you. Go ahead.
Same question. I've previously had both coaches come to me and say they want to waive any time for bathroom breaks.
Yeah, and you'll start your clock with an hourglass.
Yeah.
Or by the sun. Well, when the sun gets to here, it'll be. Yeah. No, I hear you. Okay. Thank you, Vern.
Maria Long has
Maria
a question.
Long. Yep. Hey, Maria. Maria, you got to unmute yourself. There you go. Sorry about that. Hey, Maria.
Thanks. Hi, Darren.
Hey.
I just want to make a comment that I agree with Steve. I would like to see us enforce the rule as it's written and let the chips fall where they may. And then we give reports back. Unless we all try to do the same thing, it just doesn't work. The rule can be modified upon feedback. And my second comment is, I've played many a 3-set match without going to the bathroom. So, get over it, people.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Well,
Thank you, Maria.
Darren, this is what I'd like to say. How many times have we had in the past, we've had 90 seconds or we had the 2-minute change, set break, and we added a minute and a half, which is less time in what they're getting for the extended bathroom break. And, I'm inclined to agree 5 minutes is enough time.
Yeah. Oh, 98% of the time I would agree. Yeah. But, Sharon, there are a couple facilities out there.
Right.
This is going to be really
I
hard.
do agree with that. I do agree with
Yeah,
that. I don't
really hard.
disagree with that.
Yeah. 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 No, good. Thank you, Maria, for your comments. Vince Poythin had an excellent question. The point penalty for men when using the MTO for a toilet visit is still in force. And yes, that's correct. There's no change there. Even though they're not taking a medical, they're using it for bathroom purpose, they would receive the point. They would forfeit whatever the term is, forfeit a point for that. So thank you, Vince, for that question. Okay, anyone has anything else? We can always come back to this, especially towards the end. This is, this isn't what the ITA had in mind. One of the things when they changed the certification calendar and the ITA kind of took over officiating, one thing we really asked them is to not have mid-season rule changes. So this is really not the utopia. So maybe, especially early in the season with the crews that you have, spend a little bit of time talking about the basics of this. Don't assume that everybody knows it. Don't assume that everybody's read everything. That would be great. That would help the players and help you. But certainly ITA doesn't want to make this a consistent thing of changing procedures mid-year. I think in this case it was warranted, especially on what happened in the fall events. But hopefully this is a one-time, one-off item. Okay, anyone have any other questions? Anything else out there, Sharon, Steve, or Relaford, before we move on? Sorry for my son crying. He had to go to the bathroom, and we denied his request. So
Give him some candy.
yeah. Okay, one thing that I forgot to mention at the start of this, and I'm going to take about 2 minutes, and I apologize, is we are talking tonight about Division I centric issues. I know a lot of you work other levels of college tennis as well, but everything we're discussing tonight pertains to the Division I level. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing is I want to congratulate everybody on this webinar and thank you, one, for joining us, but number two, you may or may not know that the reason why you got an invite to this, and it didn't go out to basically the entire membership, is that you have been recommended as one of the better referees out there. We did solicit recommendations from coaches across the country, other members of the officials committee, what have you. And so all of you on here tonight are there for a reason. So congratulations on that, or condolences, I guess. But we just want to say thanks for all you're doing and continue to do. And certainly you are the leaders of our ITA officials. So just should have mentioned at the start, I apologize, but thank you again for joining us. Okay, let's move on. We can always come back to anything that comes up. Okay, actually, I'm gonna call an audible, and Jerry Banks raised her hand real quick. So Jerry, go ahead, Jerry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The ITA table 5 at the back of the book, any chance of your committee of just redoing that and putting it in for us to run it off, maybe to put it in our booklet?
Yes, good question. Obviously, these were printed before this change was done. But there's a revised has it been changed yet on the online PDF? Do you know? Did you look? I haven't.
No,
Okay.
Darren, it hasn't. In fact,
Okay.
I sent Courtney an email today on that issue. Jerry, I'll make a note and I'll send you my copy tomorrow or tonight, probably tomorrow. And it has the changes in yellow And I did mention to to Courtney, that the tables in the back needed to be changed as well once it was published online. I've sent it out to a few people, but I'll make a note and I'll get it out to you, and that should take care of your question.
Okay, thank you. I just think
Thank
it
you,
might
Jerry.
be, better for all of us in a way.
Yes,
Sure.
Courtney's working on it, but as you know, she's doing everything for us, and God bless her. Like I says, I will get one out to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, for
Not a
mentioning
problem.
that. I hadn't seen that. So
And
thank
if there's anybody else online that needs it, just send me an email and I'll get it out to you.
Okay, and one other person I'd just like to acknowledge before we move on is Corey Brooks from the ITA staff has joined us. So, Corey, I think you've heard some of the bathroom discussion, so you can take that back with you. So, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Okay, Coach's Code of Conduct, another pretty significant rule change this past year. Remember, for Division One, I think for all the divisions, but specifically Division One. Is the Coach's Code of Conduct. Remember that the official coach's warning is now out the window. It doesn't exist. If a coach deviates from their code of conduct and the official or referee or rover, whoever, feels it is warranted, the first punitive penalty against that particular coach is a point penalty. Also remember that the coaches are treated now separate from each other. So you could have actually 3 different tracks for coaching penalties. It used to be that the coaching staff was treated cumulatively. So if the head coach did something and then the volunteer assistant did something, it followed the same track of penalties. Now each coach has their own track here for penalties. The first official one is a point penalty, and then of course the next one, if you have to get to that, is an ejection from the match. It's not another penalty against the player. I think we talked about that in the certification, the feeling that a ejection from a coach was punitive enough. But the second one is an ejection. And one of the things I've always, at least in my head, what I try to sort myself out with this is, I think now we kind of have to treat coaches' conduct as how we kind of view code violations, in that a player will do something and you have to make a judgment in your head. Okay, is this something I can deal with for the rest of the match? If the answer is no, I probably need to do something. I might not have to give a punitive penalty right away. I might be able to exercise a caution or what have you. But of course, if it's something pretty major, there are no cautions in that. So on your screen are some examples of kind of a uniform, what a lot of people have basically agreed on. That's just some pretty basic yeses and nos. I can't stress enough that coaches can disagree with decisions by officials, rovers, chair umpires, and referees. Just because there's a disagreement doesn't mean that they are out of line or unprofessional, or you have to give them the penalty. Of course, we all know the difference between that and actual abuse. Remember that these penalties are now like basically any other code violation. It is appealable to the referee. So if you have another official on your crew that issues a point penalty to a coach, the coach has a right to ask to see the referee, and the referee would then make the final decision, just like any other question of law. So remember that and keep that in mind. And of course, on the no side, anytime we've got coaches out there making comments about physical conditions, mental capacities of officials, weight, pay, character, honesty, integrity, and certainly in physical contact, that's completely unacceptable. So those would certainly be on the no side. Sharon, Steve, or Relaford, anything that's not on the screen that comes to mind? I mean, these are general categories. Anything you'd like to add or any comments on that, or based on your experience?
I've just told the coaches, don't make it personal.
It's always nice when they don't.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Relaford or Steve?
I agree with Sharon. But again, we're dealing with some very experienced officials out here. They should be able to fill in the gaps. There's probably some lines that they could add to this, but again, with the experience that I'm seeing with the names out there, I don't think we have to beat this horse.
Yep. Relaford, anything?
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, Al Clausen actually asked a real good question. Al tends to appreciate your question, Al, on this. I'm just looking at it. It says, the referee, as we know, can only default a player under the point penalty system in college. Can a chair or a rover eject the coach, or do they have to refer to the referee for the ejection? Thoughts on that, guys?
Sharon, you want to take this, or Relaford, or?
You go ahead.
Okay, well, the referee is the one that ejects the coach. The official notifies the referee. The referee will determine whether or not that ejection is going to be upheld, and then it's the referee to tell the coach they have to leave.
Yeah, certainly if an official ejects the coach, I mean, that's going to be appealed right away anyway. So in practice, you're correct, Steve. Certainly that's something that you as a referee should be the final authority on, because that is a significant decision with lots of potential consequences down the road for them. So potentially. So thanks for that answer. Good question, Al. Mark Kazmatis, must the coach leave the site if ejected? I would say yes. I mean, obviously you have to balance kind of the safety of the players and supervising, but they really shouldn't be. I mean, we used to have a saying in Southern Cal when we would suspend associates of players that they couldn't be within earshot or eye shot of the court, or in this case, the facility. Thoughts on that, guys, if any?
I agree.
Well, the coach has 1 minute to leave after being notified by the referee that the coach is ejected. Failure to do so within that 1 minute, the referee has the authority to default the remaining matches in progress.
Right.
By rule.
Right. No, that's true. Page 48. Yep. Or maybe the individual section. Yep. Good. Thank you, Steve. And Mark always has good questions. Thank you, Mark. Do we confiscate their cell phone?
No.
I don't know if we want to go that far.
Unless it's a model that you need.
Right. Exactly. Or you need to call Japan in the next 20 minutes.
I mean, if you do have some relatives overseas and it's an overseas phone capable.
Yeah. Exactly.
I would consider it.
Yeah. We got a couple hands up. Rob Meister. Hey, Rob. How you doing? Rob, you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right, I'm unmuted. All right,
Yep,
yeah, along those same lines, a lot of the matches we don't have a referee that's off court. So if the referee's on court and a coach is given a penalty point, does the coach have the right to see the referee? And if so, does play stop or should play continue? And let's say I get off the court on a changeover or even a game and go down and talk to him. So what procedurally would you like us to do?
Yeah, and I'll let the other three folks or anybody chime in, but to me, that is a appeal of a penalty. Therefore, really no intervening points should be played prior to that being decided. So in this case, you would suspend probably the match you're on, or if there's happens to be a free official and it's practical, maybe have them, especially if it's a roving situation, watch the match until you solve it. But you really can't have another point played before that particular decision's made. That's my opinion. Sharon, any
I agree.
on that? I mean, to me, I think you need to treat it like a code violation. I mean, the player has no right of appeal on a code violation if we've already played 2 points subsequent to the code. So I'm kind of using the same logic here. You got to get down and deal with that right away.
Okay.
Personally.
I mean, that was what my thought was, but I just wanted clarification.
But again, there's no rule and there's no guidance on it. I'm just kind of, telling you what I think based on what I read the rule and what I thought the intention was. So anyone wants to make a contrary opinion or argument, I'm happy to give them that forum and give them a chance.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Good to hear your voice. Daryl. Hey, Daryl. Go ahead.
Hey, that's me again. Yeah.
Good.
So do we have the right to request that a coach speak in a language we can understand if they start going off, if you give them a point penalty, for example, and then they start going off in a foreign language that you don't understand? I mean, we caution players about that, of course, when they're playing before we would impose a unsportsmanlike conduct for foreign language outbursts. But what about with those coaches if they start going off in a foreign language if you penalize them?
Yeah, it's a good question. We would let the coach talk, coach their players.
Right.
We're not going to necessarily eavesdrop and police that. Of course, if they're, and I guess you could make the same provision if they're yelling a string of words in a foreign language.
At us.
What the procedure is, what we know what we do with players.
Right, but I'm talking about at us.
I'm just thinking and talking out loud. So
yeah, okay.
I guess you could argue the same logic would be here. It's you would caution them, and the next time you'd have to do something about it, unless. Anyway, that's a good question, Sharon, or any thought on that, or anybody? Maybe if somebody has a thought on that, go ahead and raise your hand.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I would say something like, Coach, I'm not sure what you're saying, but it doesn't sound good. If you continue, right, you could get a penalty under the coach's code.
Yeah, Daryl, has that happened to you? That happens to you every match, right, Daryl?
Every match, right? No, there is one particular coach in the Big Ten that has a habit of when he's not pleased, regardless of whether you give him a penalty or not, but he's not pleased about a decision you may make, not supporting an overrule, whatever.
There's only one. There's only one in the Big Ten.
Well, there's only one that seems to do it more than others.
Okay.
So he expresses his displeasure with whatever circumstance it is in a foreign language, so it's kind of tricky. I don't know what he's saying, and so I'm just wondering what latitude I have in trying to bring him in line with, look, I've got to understand what you're saying. You have the right to say something, but I need to understand it because it's directed toward me, or a decision I made.
Right.
So
yeah, and
I know that.
Yeah, and this is one of the great things about, and what makes college officiating challenging, exciting, but also really challenging, because you've got extra people out there that can influence or have some sort of a role in a match, and at some point you got to control them. And so that's why I guess where I'm saying is that we know what the procedure is with players when they yell a string of words in a language that we don't understand. I think we can all agree what the procedure is. It hasn't changed in how many years. I guess you could probably take the same principle and take it to the coach.
That's my feeling.
The volume, probably, you might, now of course, if you recognize a couple of those words, then, and they're not good, just like we do with players, we wouldn't just caution them just because they're
right.
not. I mean, we go straight to the code. So in this case, but to me, it'd probably be the same logic.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's my thought as well. But I just wanted to get some input from a lot of experienced folks.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, exactly. Good question.
I don't know Polish, so I'm out of luck with this coach.
Yeah. No, I got you. Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate it. Okay, a couple other things quickly to talk about here. Remember that last year, if a coach interfered with a play on court, we would call that the first time and give them an official coach's warning. Well, now we don't have an official coach's warning. So in that particular case, as if you remember in the summertime, we talked about that player would lose the point for hindrance. You wouldn't give them a point penalty, of course, unless they were being abusive or what have you. But sometimes we do have coaches interfering with play. Most times they're doing it unintentionally. They thought a ball was out and they start celebrating the point and the player decides to play it. Once it becomes that, it's a hindrance to the other player. So just a reminder that procedure has changed a little bit simply because we don't have actual coaches warning. The last thing maybe we want to talk about here is because of especially the coaches having separate tracks, I'm wondering if maybe a couple of you could talk to us about maybe some good strategies, how you communicate those penalties to your crew if you do not have an off-court referee. And as we know, the majority of college matches don't have an off-court referee. So if there's anybody out there that might have a good strategy or a good practice that they've done, go ahead and raise your hand or type your question. And certainly Terry Bailey walkie-talkies, that's a good way of doing it as well. But if anybody has something they'd like to contribute, or certainly Steve, Sharon, or Relaford, go ahead and chime in. But just was curious because now you got 3 different potential scenarios out there. And as we know, coaches move courts a lot and move maybe officials. So Clay Boone. Hey, Clay, just unmuted you. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I was doing at that ITA Southeast Regional, because we had so many courts in play, I keep little books in between courts so all the officials can write down any of the codes or any of the problem areas. Okay. So if you gave a code violation on a specific coach, it was in the book. And then that way they can transition that book to the next official that comes out or whatnot. But for those like that, but in team format play, we're probably going to just look at doing something like that, especially if we're outside, but have the radios possibly right there too as well. So just as a backup plan. So that's something we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. My follow-up question would be is, as we know, good chair umpires, that radio shouldn't be on court. How would you handle that? Or have you thought about that?
A lot of times they'll turn it on and they'll just on the changeover, they'll say, coach's code violation given to so-and-so or whatnot during that time frame. So I would think that won't be an issue too often where I'm at, but
right.
But yeah, the when you're spread out, that's where you're going to have issues. You just need to make sure that your chairs are well aware of the procedure prior to going on court.
Yeah, no, good point. Thanks, Clay. Good to hear your voice. Okay, anybody else want to contribute one? I've got one, but anything from the crew here? So one thing that you could do is, a lot of times you have a person on your crew that might be a little more experienced, what have you, is you can try to schedule your officials or yourself and them to make sure, they're either might be on a different bank of courts. So for example, let's say it's a chaired match with all 6 courts, you as a referee are on number 5, your second person might be on 2, and kind of give them the authority to be the first line of communication with the 2 chair umpires that are next to them. So you kind of break up the crew in groups of 3. I found that to be somewhat effective, but it's going to be a challenge now because the minute not that we weren't doing this in the past, but the minute a coach gets a point penalty, every single person really needs to know really quick because they might move 5 courts down and do something that they shouldn't. And of course, another point penalty will then be issued, and then as we know, it's going to be interesting. All bleep's going to break loose. So, all right, excellent suggestions, everyone. Al Clausen. Hey, Al.
Can you hear me?
Yep. How are you doing, Al? Good. Go ahead.
Good. Thank you. One question on this: before the season started at our annual meeting here in North Carolina, it was mentioned to our group that in the case of a coach interfering with play, for example, if they yelled something that's clearly audible, like that ball was out or something like that, that the chair should not stop play unless one of the players stops or unless one of the players gives some indication that they were clearly hindered. It's similar to, I guess, like a ball falling out of a pocket or a hat falling off. You shouldn't do anything, no matter how loud it was, I guess, unless one of the players, stops play or gives some indication, like looking at you or at the coach, that they were, put off by it. Do you agree with all that?
I mean, I think that's a valid argument you could make. I mean, the ITF maybe changed. Remember, they changed the procedure on this a few years ago, made it a little more difficult for officials. But now you don't automatically step in and call it, but you should be looking for even the slightest cue from the opponent that they're hindered. A lot of times they're not going to say something. They're going to maybe hesitate. They're going to look at you. There's going to be some sort of nonverbal cue, and then jump in. But I mean, I can certainly understand maybe why that logic is, because of it being the same principle as some of these other things. Sharon, Steve, or Relaford, any comments on that? I think a lot of times the player's going to stop right away anyway. But
Yeah, the player usually does stop. And my biggest problem is with coaches trying to call lets and jumping in on that.
Right.
And especially under roving situations. This is the only place I've found out that the coaches really get uptight about, is when you got rovers and you're not looking down there and there's balls rolling across the court and they want to stop play down there.
Right. Yeah. Al, back to you. Al, what's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, in some ways it seems reasonable, but another thing about that, though, is if you do nothing and the point's finished, then the point would stand. I think we'll all agree on that.
Yeah.
And then I guess the chair umpire could, if nothing else, he could then caution, unofficial caution to the coach that,
right,
you really shouldn't be doing that during play. If a player stops, you could end up losing the point. But I guess at that stage, if the point's complete, other than giving a soft caution, there's nothing you can do. You can't give the next point to the other team,
No,
because.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I understand the logic, and I think for the most part that's what was being done. Of course, in this, last year it was a let, so it wasn't a loss of point. Of course, the coach would get an official warning. Here it's an actual loss of point, but I mean, I could understand the tying the two together. I mean, it is a hindrance from the player, or in this case, the uniqueness of college tennis, the associate of a player, the extension of a player, as we like to call it. In this case, would be a coach out there, and this has happened. I mean, and Sharon's point is spot on. There are coaches out there that, and with good intentions, trying to stop play because they're concerned about potential issues with injuries and stuff. I'm not saying that the intentions are wrong; they're right. Unfortunately, they can't do that. Yeah. And Al, is that the meeting, North Carolina, where you guys have caviar? Is that?
No, not quite that extravagant.
Okay. Is Rebel barbecuing for you?
He didn't this year. I'll have to speak to him about that.
Okay. Great. Good to hear your voice. Rob Meister. Hey, Rob, you got to unmute yourself.
Daryl, along those lines, at Florida State, we had the Invitational this week that Maria and Sharon were there with me. And that was the biggest concern that some of the coaches had, was they didn't mind actually getting the point penalty, penalty point, if they felt their player was in jeopardy. They figured that would be worth it. I think it needs to be a learning curve, because we have so many different, how do I want to put this? Inexperienced to seasoned to very experienced officials that are sometimes hesitant to make the call. But But I do think is just like the 5-minute rule. If a coach yells it out, it's got to be loss of point automatic. They know the rule. We explained it to them, and that's the way it should be, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think we can have any, in this case, gray area.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts on that, guys, or anything? Nobody? Steve, you're unmuted. Steve, anything on any comments on that or anything?
No, we've covered it, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good scenario. I mean, I guess I understand what Al was talking about. I mean, I understand maybe why there's a linkage, or some people feel there's a linkage between the two. I mean, 95 times out of 100, the player is going to do something that's going to show some sort of hindrance. That's my feeling. But good question. Thanks, Rob, for inserting that. Well done. Okay. Any other questions, guys, or anything that's come up? We're rolling right along here. Thanks to everyone joining.
Vern has his hand up.
Oh, he does? I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, Vern.
Hi. The suggestion on how to deal with a coach who makes multiple requests to see the referee on a question of law, and thus interrupting the play on two courts, the court where there's the question of law and then the referee who now has to deal with it. And we're assuming that the official is competent.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your question. So separate issues, and that both happen to be questions of law, and they're asking.
Yeah, they're throughout the match. Every time they keep coming up with questions of law, not only on code violations but on other things they want to ask questions about. So they interrupt the match and then demand to see the referee. So the referee now has to come down and tell the coach that the umpire is correct.
Okay. I assume this has happened.
Yes.
To you? Okay. I don't see what we really can do about that. If it's truly a question of law, even though maybe it's our opinion that the coach might be doing it simply to distract or stall. I mean, they have a right to see you. Do you have a contrary opinion, or is anybody? I don't see why they wouldn't have a right to see you. Now you can expedite those discussions pretty quickly. You know, it's like I saw everything before I even talked to you. I agree with the chair umpire. Okay, what do you have to tell me? It's just my first thought on that question. I don't know. I don't know if we can really do anything about that. Do you, Vern, or what do you think?
Well, it can be disruptive if the referee has to run across three courts to deal with the issue.
Right. But that's their job. I mean, if they're the referee for that match, they are the authority on the appealable body on questions of law.
Yeah, Vern, I don't think there's any other way around it. I hear what you're saying, that it just must play, but
frustrating.
There's really no other way around it.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Is this a common practice, or?
No, there was one coach in particular who remained nameless, but.
Okay, no, I'm not asking the name. Okay. Yeah, again, I mean that's part of your duties. So as long as it, I mean, and as we know, I mean, a lot of things. There's not too many things out there that aren't questions of law, or somebody who has a good argument can turn into a question of law. I mean, obviously, a line decision, a not up, a double bound, those are questions of fact. But basically, any code violation is a question of law. Sharon, can you think of any code that would be a question of fact, because you're interpreting a certain procedure? Or
Ooh.
I mean, I don't know of any.
I don't know of any.
So, going back to the coaches thing, I mean, if you're issuing coaching penalties for behavior, I mean that's to me that's a question of law. So, but no, it's frustrating. I understand where you're going, Vern. It's hard, but just make yourself unavailable for that match or be sick.
Hey, you want to come out to Omaha or Lincoln?
Sure. Yeah. Big Ten women are there.
Yeah, all right.
Tickets now. Thanks again, Vern.
Looks like Al's got another question.
Okay, we'll take one more and then we'll move on. Hey, Al.
Actually, I took my hand down. I was just going to mention on what I brought up earlier that I did actually have that happen a few years ago when I was referee at a regional, where a coach said something. I can't recall what it was. It was clearly audible to the players in a doubles match. They didn't stop. They continued to play. In fact, the chair umpire even gave him an answer even responded to him, and yet play continued. And then when it ended, of course, the opposing team unfortunately lost the point, and so they really raised hell about the whole thing. How can you be having this obvious conversation going on here in the middle of a point? But that was a few years ago, and so the point stood, and my solution was, I still gave the coach a warning, for interfering with play, because you could do a warning at that time.
Yeah.
But now I guess all you can do is like a kind of a soft warning, and you can't hand out another point, for that. So anyway,
I certainly don't want to have a conversation about in the middle of a point with a coach. I mean, I think I've given 3 coaches warnings in my whole life. Coincidentally, they've all been since I moved to the South. No, just kidding. The only one I gave on the West Coast was the player did something stupid, and the coach that stood up and said, "What the bleep F word are you doing?" And then explained to the coach, we don't let the players use those words. I'm going to have to give you a coach's warning. Wait for one more point to play, and then turn around and go, "But I got the same question. I don't know what the bleep he was doing." So we had a good laugh.
Yeah.
And he never did it again. So, okay. Thanks, Al. Okay. Let's move on to our second pop poll tonight, or question. And this is the situation where a player takes a bleeding timeout for a nosebleed in the first set. And of course, the player's nose begins to bleed again in the third set. And I'm sure this has happened to you every match. Just kidding, but it could happen. So the question we have here is, in your opinion, what do you do as the referee when the player's nose begins to bleed again for a second time? Now remember, they have taken a bleeding timeout already for that particular nosebleed. So we will go ahead and launch this poll. There you go. That's what I like to hear. Okay, thank you, Sharon. Okay, we're at 80. Thorning, who was doing that. Thank you, Sharon. We're at 89%. We'll give about 5 more seconds. Okay, go ahead and close this. Sorry, I had Alex Trebek on my mind. Okay, and as you see the results here, we've got quite a few folks. That's weird. Steve, is this New Hampshire math? I'm adding all those percentages, and that comes to what, 115%?
Well, that was cold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good living right there, right? 115%. So
we can have that discussion afterwards.
Yeah, I like that. So obviously, I don't think we had 97% say if the bleeding does not stop, the player must retire. Yeah, but that as we know is the answer. Remember, They're not allowed to have another bleeding timeout because it's the same part of the body. Of course, if they had a knee scrape, you could give them one, but in this case, it's clearly the same part of the body. We cannot allow a medical timeout for this because remember the interpretation last year that a bleeding timeout can never be done for a medical time. Excuse me, a medical timeout cannot be used for a bleeding purpose. And the forfeit points, that is kind of an ITF procedure on muscle cramping. Players can forfeit points or games to get themselves to change over for treatment for verified muscle cramping. ITA doesn't have that procedure at this point. They certainly don't have it for blood. So the majority of you folks got it right. Well done. Any comments on that, Sharon? Or this happened 3 times this weekend for you down at Tallahassee?
No, not for me. It didn't.
That's good. That's great officiating. Relaford or Steve, any comment?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. So just again, want to stress, those of you that are on this, I mean, there's a reason why almost every one of these, a lot of the subjects we talk about are medical timeouts and bathroom visits. Of course, we had a pretty good discussion tonight on coaches' conduct, but those are 2 particular provisions in the ITA rules that tend to have variations based on divisions, although they've been cleaned up a little bit, and there tends to be some confusion. So that's why we keep talking about them. So we'll talk a little bit more about medicals and bleeding. Sharon, player is done with a bleeding timeout, and everything's cleaned up, and the court's clean, the balls, the shirt, whatever. How much time do you feel that they have to resume play?
It should be in play by 25 seconds.
Yeah, in this case, 30. Yeah, it would be just like a medical timeout. Yeah.
Chris Citron's got an interesting question. He wants to know if there's been any talk about kind of like with the ITF rule of giving up points to get to a medical treatment. See, creating a rule to allow players to forfeit points to a changeover like is allowed with an ITF medical timeout. So in other words, like if in ITF they have to give up points in order to be able to be treated by loss of conditioning, which is cramping.
Yeah.
Has there been any talk about that?
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to unmute you. Are you suggesting that that happened, or want to take a stance on it? Okay, I know you are. That's why I'm unmuting you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are instances where it comes up. A number of instances I have done matches where it's come up where the player doesn't, they've used their especially with ITA where they've already used a medical timeout and they want treatment on a changeover, but they can't. They're in the middle of the game, and obviously they can't get treatment, and they're just going to have to hobble around or essentially retire if they can't continue. Why would they not be allowed to forfeit points to get to the changeover where that changeover treatment could allow them to play?
And it's an even number game, so they really can't buy time through the code because that game penalty ain't going to get them to a changeover.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm not aware of any discussion on this. Relaford was actually at the coaches convention. Was there any discussion on any of this, Relaford, that you know of?
No, I didn't hear any discussion about that.
Yeah. So, I know Vince Proithen had a match last year where that happened, and the player, I believe, was trying to forfeit, and he rightfully didn't allow him. But I mean, it would certainly make it a little bit easier. But remember that particular ITF rule is only for muscle cramping. I mean, if they have a sprained ankle and they hurt it again, they wouldn't be able to forfeit points for that or games. So, it's a good question. I'm not aware of any discussion at this point for that.
And
thank you, Chris.
Would there be? How would you get that discussion started? I'm just curious. Is there a way to get it started? I mean,
yeah. Before we go to bed tonight, I'll talk to Courtney about it. No, just kidding. Hopefully that line wasn't recorded, but No, it would be like most other things in the ITA. I mean, Corey's on the line. It'd probably have to come out of a committee, or officials committee could make a recommendation. I would personally, I would want to really think about it and study some of the ramifications for it before I personally would say I'm willing to put my name on advocating for that. But I do totally get where you're going. I mean, and it works pretty well on the ITA side. On the ITF side. But I mean, there's procedures there too. Remember that only the physio can determine that the player's cramping. So there is other ways for the player to kind of buy time without, buying time, if you know what I mean. So
Yes, but they don't have those ways with the ITA, so that's why.
Right. Yeah. Good point. So yeah, we made a note of it, and when Anthony just went to Australia, I believe today. So when he gets back, I'll mention that this came up on this and see what he thinks. So since he's kind of our leader. Thanks, Chris. Good to hear your voice. Okay, we have a couple hands up. Hey, Rob Meister. Rob, you got to unmute yourself.
Along those same lines, how would you handle this question if vomiting was involved? You cleaned it up, the player played a game or two and got sick again.
Okay. And they basically received.
They received a medical timeout. The court has been cleaned. Play has begun again. 2-3 games later, he throws up again. Would it be a default? Retirement, rather?
I don't see why it wouldn't. Of course, there's a provision that says you can move the match.
No, I'm just saying, obviously the guy's got some issues.
Yeah. Sharon, thought on that one?
It seems like to me he probably needs to retire. You can't keep cleaning up court.
Okay.
Can't keep stopping play just because he's throwing up. That comes under loss of conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fairness to the opponent issue here too. You got to balance like anything.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Daryl Davies. Hey, Daryl.
How about, would you treat a self-induced bleeding incident any different than an, let's say, accidental bleeding incident? Sometimes these kids hit their fists against their strings, or they hit their, racket against their side of their knee or calf or whatever. And I've certainly seen that generate a bleeding incident.
Yeah.
I know
cut themselves on purpose to buy time.
Well,
right?
I don't know about cutting. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I've seen it once.
When they swing their racket and hit themselves and so on, or the fence, or something of that nature, it's obviously they have created that condition. It's not an accidental result of an accident. So I know we have to treat it in terms of cleaning up blood and everything for the sake of the hygienic issue. But would you do anything else in that incident?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm happy to get other opinions. To me, if you're 100% positive that the player did this, in terms of a purposeful nature, and it's certainly not going to be a popular decision, but I think you have to give him the code.
I would.
For unsportsmanlike conduct.
I would, and I have.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to be sure. I mean, it's you're getting out on thinner ice there, but
As a delay. I mean, you could classify it as a delay
or unsports, or the famous, and I know Steve Gertis is on this webinar. Steve, good to see your name. I know Steve likes the famous umbrella unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah.
He likes that. He uses it in Scrabble all the time. So he uses it as one word, no space. So yeah, I mean, to me, you got to give him the code, but you got to be 100% sure, like anything. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Daryl.
Yeah.
Got a lot of good scenarios.
I've had them all.
I'm sure. Okay. Question for the crew, and this will be the last thing we'll talk about on this slide, unless somebody else wants to talk about something. what if a bleeding timeout and a medical is required simultaneously? So, for example, the player runs wide, trips, sprains their ankle, and at the same time trying to break their fall, scrapes their hand or something. Are there thoughts about how we're going to handle that? Is there a priority there? I'm just curious. Go ahead and raise your hand or type your question if you want to give an opinion on that, or certainly Steve, Sharon, or Relaford jump in on that. A thought on that one.
You deal with the bleeding timeout first.
Okay, and why would that be? I agree with you, but why would that be?
That is the longer, and that's probably going to be your most complicated issue to deal with.
Yeah, well, it's a medical necessity, so yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Anybody else?
Would you not, I have a different opinion.
Okay.
Would you not let the trainer make the determination of what they treat first? Because wouldn't they know better than we would, since that's kind of their job? You know what I mean?
No, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't tell them what to treat first. I would let them do it in the order that they need to do it in. They may need to treat the blood before they treat the injury, but they may need to treat the injury first. That makes sense?
If it's acute, yeah. I mean, I guess I can hear that side. This is what I love about these kind of things. I mean, that's a good argument. My first thought was blood, but they are qualified medical personnel, so we are putting faith in their expertise on that. Anybody want to add to that or give an opinion? Jerry Banks. Hey, Jerry.
Yes. Also, with the bleeding, then you also want to check surfaces if there's blood on the ball or other places that need to be cleaned up. And so that adds to the time of the bleeding timeout if you are standing and working or assessing the MTO as a referee. So just some added things to that as well. And if have an injury, then I might want to have ice on it. And if I could get the ice on, then the bleeding, I really like the assessment of the trainer. That seems to be a safety issue and puts it out front.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, they're qualified medical personnel. So, I mean, I think Relaford might have convinced me here. I think my first thought was because the potential for more issues from the blood side of things. But if it's very small and you have a real acute sprained ankle, obviously the player's in significant pain. We probably want to alleviate that pain first. But a lot of times what the trainer might decide to do the blood first. But Relaford, you convinced me. Good job.
What are you going to do if you don't have a trainer?
Flip a coin, two-headed coin called tails. No, just kidding.
No, I do agree with Relaford. However, if it's an acute situation, I don't really think blood is going to be an issue that you're going to have to concern yourself with.
Yeah. Well, remember the player can treat themselves, or in this case, if there's no trainer, I mean, they can have somebody of their choosing treat them. So, what's your thoughts, Steve, on that? I mean, are you gonna let them make that decision? Are you gonna try to guide them a certain way, or is everything case by case there?
Well, it is case by case, but the rule of thumb is you normally treat the bleeding first before a sprained ankle. But again, if it's something major, and as Relaford said, it's acute, then you've upped the ante. And then the blood really doesn't become an issue because the player's gone.
Yeah. Are we going to allow two trainers out there to help with both at the same time?
If you're fortunate enough to have two trainers, why not?
Okay, I think the rule only says trainer singular, but I don't have it in front of me, but.
I don't believe there's a rule that says you can only have one trainer on court.
Okay.
You can have only one trainer taking care of the person, but that doesn't have to do with cleaning up the court.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Yeah. Hey, Daryl, go ahead.
Just a couple of thoughts. The medical person, if you have, is the expert here. We really should not be making, in my opinion, medical decisions. That is, which thing to treat first, which is worse. I don't think we should be making those decisions based upon time frames. Like, oh my gosh, I have 3 minutes for a medical. I have 15 bleeding. Let's see, if I do the medical first, well, then I might get 18 then total. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think we should be making the decision on timing factors. The medical person is the expert. I don't think if the implication or the assumption there about one trainer, singular, the assumption is also for one injury.
Yeah, that's true.
I suppose if you have two simultaneous injuries that are different, well, okay, you have two trainers. That's fine. One for each injury. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on who should be making those decisions about what takes priority.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, sir. Okay, Marcella. Hey, Marcella. Marcella Calero. Hey,
Hi, how are you? I totally agree with Darrell. I think we shouldn't be taking those decisions at all. I mean, we don't at the pro circuit when we need to determine if the player is cramping or not. Why would we here? I think that's the trainer's job.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Good point.
Hey, Darren.
Yeah.
I think we've morphed this into 2 or 3 different questions. I believe that the original question was, as a referee, what are you going to be dealing with first? I don't think there was any indication as a referee as what you were going to treat first. I thought the question evolved, what do you do as a referee? What are you taking care of first? I'm starting my clock for the bleeding timeout first, because here's your 15 minutes max.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think there was anything about, as a referee, what are you going to treat or tell the trainer what to treat. I think we kind of morphed it into one thing led into another.
Okay.
I mean, as a referee, if you have 2 injuries at the same time, you better start your clock and deal with the bleeding timeout. That's your largest amount of time that you're dealing with. That's your most complicated issue. Then, of course, if the trainer says we have some other issues we have to deal with, but you still have your clock running, because you still have to be concerned with the fairness of the opponent.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think now we have morphed it into, what are you going to do? Is nobody ever said that the referee was going to tell the trainer what to treat first.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we all agree that the QMP is the authority on that, but that's a good point, Steve. I mean, that 15-minute maximum suspension of play does apply here. So, that as official or a referee, that's kind of our first job, is to have that in the background, and inform accordingly, based on questions that you get. But it's going to happen. We're going to occasionally have simultaneous ones, and I think we all agree that the qualified medical personnel will kind of make that determination based on the case by case of the circumstances of the situation. So, thank you, Steve, for that. Okay, do we have anything else on this one? Okay, folks, we advertised we would go to 9 o'clock Eastern. We're pretty much right on schedule. We'll stay on as long as anyone would like, but certainly respectful of your time. And so we got a few more things maybe to talk about here, and then we'll move on. Sharon Wright, would you say this is the number one coach's, I want to say, issue with officials? That's maybe a wrong term, but concern about consistency around the country?
Yeah, it is one of the big concerns, because you got some coaches that want you to call lets, just like USTA, as soon as the ball enters the court. And you got our rule that says we're not supposed to do anything but call endangerment lets. It puts some of our officials in bad situations, and I know Donna gets into them down there at Auburn, because Lauren wants lets called everywhere. You get the same thing down at Florida State. We got Jen down there wants lets called everywhere. Yep. And you know, it's reminding the coaches, hey, they were told in the pre-match, their calls, mine the ones that are endangered.
Yeah, I mean, this was a point of emphasis in the summer. I know all of you that were on the certification. You know, again, the term endangerment is a pretty loose term. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can justify as endangerment. But I guess what you know, at least what I'm trying to say is, you know, we really don't want to see, or I'm sure you don't want to see, one of your crew calling a let on a ball that's, you know, 30 feet in front of a player, has absolutely no bearing on the point. They're perfectly comfortable finishing that point, and then of course, right as the one player is about to win the point, the let gets called. So you know, unfortunately, we've seen that occasionally. All of us make, you know, some of us probably have done that. I mean, I know I called an endangerment let one time where the ball actually ended up changing direction after I had looked at it. And so when I called the let, the ball probably wasn't an endangerment at that, but it was at some point. So this is pretty loose and open-ended, but let's try to get away from the real obvious ones. Does anybody on Sharon, Relaford, or Steve, or anyone on this webinar have any best practices for this, or something that maybe you talk to your crew about, how you explain how you want this done, or any procedure, or a good pre-match to a player's a sentence that you use on a pre-match to a player to help stress this? I got Willie. Hey, Willie Daniels. Willie, good to see your name. Willie, go ahead. Oh,
yes, this sounds like to me, from the beginning of this webinar, the term or the expression was expressed that we don't make the rules.
Right.
The coaches make the rules, and apparently they agreed on the rule being 3 feet or whatever. If I remember, it's 3 feet from the fence. That's not endangerment. So if we start trying to manipulate that, we're doing the same thing as most of these discussions have been about, where it turns out that instead of following the rules, we're just making decisions on our own.
Yeah, good point. I am not aware of any specific rule that talks about within a feet of a court or what have you. Are you aware of that, Willie, or Sharon, or?
Well, seems to me a couple of years ago, that's when this first came out. It had to do with, I can't say exactly what is 3 feet, because we all know rules change quite frequently, but it was, the ball was in a certain distance from the fence behind the player. That was our measurement. We don't get involved in anything to where it's in front of the player, like you said. If it comes in front of the player, we don't get involved in it. Because I can say that I have had several coaches out here on the West Coast who have said something about, why didn't you call that? And my understanding from what I did on my testing and everything was, there's a certain area where you don't have to call it. You shouldn't be, as a chairperson anyway. And since we're talking about referees, then we're talking about the discussion of a referee getting involved in that call. But as a chairperson, there was supposed to be a certain distance, from my understanding anyway.
Yeah, and I hear you. I'm not aware of anything that's ever come out ever that has been specific as to 3 feet, 5 feet. I mean, Sharon, are you aware of that?
No, I've never heard anything as far as that's concerned.
But isn't there some information that says there is something where we do not get involved in making that call? Has that been an understanding of?
Well, yeah, I can only speak for me. I mean, my understanding was the ITA procedure on this was always endangerment lets only.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been as long as I can remember. So, and obviously that term is, you know, there's some subjectivity to that. I think that's where you're getting. So,
yes.
Well, you know, if we go back to a long time ago, I mean, you know, when we used to play the videos with the ITA, we showed how, you know, lets that you call, you don't call, the ones rolling the back of the fence, you know, you leave those alone. You know, something that the player doesn't actually see or he's actually gonna step on. Those are what you're calling.
You're talking about what I'm talking about.
But the only thing is they did not have any specific
Well, I
amount of,
backed up on that as far as a specific distance. I backed up on that. Okay, there is no specific distance, but there is an area behind the player near the fence where you don't call the ball, and that was decided by the coaches.
correct, ball that's rolling along the back of the fence, you're supposed to leave alone. And as you've gotten used to the players, you realize what balls that they leave back there that may be a foot and a half or a couple of feet away from the fence, because they've got a big back area to play in. Okay, it's just according to what the site is. Yeah. And how large the courts are as to how much space there is between them and that ball and the fence. Those players in doubles, that ball could be halfway between the doubles back there in the back court, and they're still playing them.
Yeah,
you know, it's judgment.
Yeah, Willie, I think I mean I agree with you on what something you said. Obviously in there is a judgment call here on some of these endangerment lets. I mean, it's not a bad idea to have a guide in your head as to, okay, that ball's too close. I mean, obviously you're not going to have a chance to go out and measure during a point. So, I mean, your experience, chair umpire, and an excellent one. I mean, you know when balls are starting to get closer than they should, and sometimes the conditions dictate how you might want to handle that. It might be a real windy day. The balls are blowing everywhere, and I mean, player safety obviously is the number one priority here, and was and always will be. I guess what we're saying here is just and I think you agree. I mean, there's no reason to be calling lets on every single ball that comes into court. It's not an automatic decision. It is a assess the facts and make a decision based on the where the ball is, the conditions, and the health and safety of the player. So
I agree with that totally.
Yeah.
I agree totally. And my only emphasis was whatever the distance is or whatever the decision was, it was made by the coaches in their conference.
Right.
That's my emphasis, is that we did not make that decision on when you should make that call.
Yep.
As officials.
Yep.
That was something that was decided, from my understanding anyway, with the coaches.
Yeah,
so
and you got to think of it this way:
beyond that, we're back to what we were talking about in the beginning. We're taking on responsibility of what the coaches have decided.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, the ITA staff, officials, no one came up with this procedure themselves. I mean, this is how the coaches as a collective unit want it to be done. Now, just like any rule, there are some coaches out there that disagree with this and might encourage you to not follow the procedure correctly. And they have their reasons. Some of it might be good. And you take their their feedback and thank you and put that away and use it as you need. But this is, I mean, and Sharon's point is spot on. I mean, these are difficult. Sometimes these are very difficult decisions particularly on the roving side, because you're not high up enough. Sometimes you don't even see those balls. It's just hard. So it's one of those we just got to keep working on and trying to have at least parameters. I think your point is good, to have some parameters we can work under and then bring those in as we need it. Excellent point, Willie. Thank you for contributing to that. Isabel, we'll do one more. Isabel Snyder. Hey, Izzy, you got to unmute yourself. There you go. Hey, Izzy.
Hello.
Yep, go ahead. I hear you.
Isabel. Hi. So I think Sharon mentioned it briefly, but for the let, it's 2 prompts. I believe it's the endangerment and the players don't see it. So that limits a lot how many lets we're going to be calling, because they see a lot of them and decide to play them, even though in our judgment they may be endangering them.
Right.
So I just wanted to highlight that point, that it's 2 prompts. It's the endangerment and they don't see it.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is the way the college facilities are now. If lets were being called on every single ball that comes in, the matches would take 10 hours. Because I mean, I don't know, Sharon, if you remember when we had the NCAAs at Stanford way back in 2006, the courts across the street. I mean, I saw Jan Ryan one time call 15 consecutive lets. And they were all legitimate lets because the balls were flying all over the place. So, I mean, part of this is a product of the way the facilities are. There's nothing we can do about that. You know, there's land is what it is, and they're trying to scrunch things in. And, you know, the distance between the courts might be legal, maybe not in some schools' cases. So, I mean, this is kind of a product of, you don't see this at the professional level because generally speaking, they're not playing on adjacent courts. So I don't want to say it's a problem unique to college tennis, but it's certainly something that college officials have to deal with more than some of the other officials out there. So, okay, any interesting questions or comments on the chat that came up? Anybody? Otherwise, we'll move on. I want to get everybody out of here at close to 9 as we can. I mean, certainly you can exit when you like. Okay, we're going to do our last pop poll real quick tonight. And this scenario is what Brad Taylor and I like to call the 2-minute drill. You got Drew Brees driving down the field, 2 minutes, 3 timeouts, ball at the 5-yard line. And what I'm talking about is the new 2-minute procedure for lineup changes that have come out where the coaches are supposed to meet each other. So you as a referee, how are you going to handle a situation when the coaches have told you we don't have any lineup changes, and then 2 minutes after the 2 minutes are over, a coach comes to you and says, I need to make a change. Are you going to allow that? And go ahead and give us your opinion. Okay. We're at 92%, so we'll go ahead and close that and share the results. Relaford, any thoughts on this one? You agree with that answer?
Yes, I agree. Too late.
Yeah, as the rule is written, that is the correct answer. It's too late. So this is a new procedure that has come down from the ITA about, in the past, of course, as we know, we as referees, after the completion of the doubles, one of our duties is to solicit the coaches as to any lineup changes that they have, and then inform the opposing side and then everybody else that you need to inform. So unfortunately, what was happening, and this was not the majority of folks, this was certainly a minority of referees out there, but there were instances where the referee would go to one coach, ask for changes, and let's say they had one, and then when they went over to the other coach, they would actually inform the coach of the change and then ask if they had changes. And certainly that's not a good procedure to do, because now that other coach has the ability to make a decision based on facts that they shouldn't have known. So this is why, the ITA wanted to change this procedure to kind of put the onus on the coaches to exchange it just like they would any other lineup. Now, obviously this is new. There are no, quote, procedures for this. Done a little thought about this. I know what I'm probably going to do at the start of this rule this year is inform both coaches before the match that our quote meeting will take place on the court that the doubles point was clinched at the center strap, and then I will be standing out there no later than 1 minute after the completion of the doubles, and then try to facilitate those two coaches to come together, unless of course they both wave me off and say I have no changes. But remember, you as a referee have a lot of stuff to do, particularly if you're supposed to officiate one or more matches during the singles. I mean, you've got to let you now don't have to let the opposing coach know of changes, but then you also have to, if there's a match announcer, your other officials, sports info, excuse me, what have you. So and there's no extra time now. So there's no 5 minutes from the change anymore. It's 5 minutes, period. So that's kind of a procedure that I've thought, oh, that might, at least have a chance of working. Clearly, as a referee, you're going to have to facilitate the coaches here and to get together, at least at the start of the season. Sharon, you had some matches this weekend, right? Can you maybe talk about maybe what you decided to do here?
Yeah, I mean, Rob did the same thing. Basically, we told the coaches at the pre-match, we'll meet right here, right after the in between court 1 and 2, which lineup would change, and some of them you have to go running after, and some of them you didn't.
Yeah. Okay. I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, this is a. Go ahead.
I just want to say something. At the coaches meeting, when this was brought up, you did have coaches say, "Well, what if I want a player? If I want a player evaluated and it takes longer than 2 minutes, then can I still make a change after that? I need to know if they're going to be able to play." So I think we are going to get some pushback on this during the season, especially as players do get injured and the coaches do want them to get evaluated. So I think we're going to have to be prepared for that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, obviously, that's the exact scenario in this pop poll. My feeling is, to me, this is one of the jobs. I mean, you've got to tell the coaches what the plan is. And then if they don't like what your plan is, then have them make an argument to convince you to do something otherwise. And what I'm meaning by that is you really need to tell them this is where we're meeting, or at least have a suggestion, because the problem is they're going to start going back and forth and what have you. Now, a lot of the teams don't leave that court that the doubles point was clinched, or if they do, they're on the adjacent court. With only the 5 minutes now, very few teams even have the time to go into the locker room. Some do, but most don't. So, my feeling, you have a fighting chance of at least getting the coaches to make eye contact with you in enough time to get those communications. And again, I'm just telling you what I think. There's no procedure on this yet. It'll be very interesting to see how this works at the start of the year. I'd be very interested in some of your thoughts after you've done this for a little bit of maybe what a best practice might be. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. Marcus Lee. Hey, Marcus, I just unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing? I was wondering, does it have to be the head coach, or can it be the assistant coach with the changes?
I don't think it has to be the head coach, but I believe it says they have to have their scorebook. So as long as the assistant coach has their official scorebook, then I don't believe it has to be the head coach. Steve, or any thought on that, or Relaford or Sharon?
Most of them were bringing their scorebook but then we had to send some of them back to go, hey, we need your scorebook if you're making any changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be the head coach. I mean, in the past, it's not been the head coach, so it hasn't had to be the head coach. So.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Marcus, 98 times out of 100, the head coach is the one going to be communicating this to you, but there might be an exception here. Good question.
Thank you.
Yep. Hey, Daryl.
Yeah, as you said earlier, we have a number of things to do on that 5-minute thing, time span ourselves. So what I've done 2 matches now, that's it. But I have put the responsibility on the coaches' shoulders by simply telling them, you have 2 minutes to inform me of any lineup changes after the doubles point is concluded. If I don't hear from you within those 2 minutes, you cannot make any changes. So, you were suggesting, oh, we're going to meet on court 1 or whatever. They're not going to remember that as far as I'm concerned. So, I tell, look, it's up to you guys. Here are the rules. You tell me, and if you don't, then there can't be any lineup changes. So that's the way I've approached it so far, anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, again, my only suggestion is if you are going to try to follow the thing to a T, have some sort of place that you tell them, and then be visible there. So hopefully there's a reminder. It's going to be an interesting procedure. But again, the reason why, and Relaford, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why this rule got put in, one reason is because of the exact scenario I just said, is that there were certain referees out there that were tipping off the other team. He's moved his number 4 out, so Smith is 5, Jones is 6. Okay, do you have any changes? I mean, that's
Well, I had an interesting situation where a coach said, "We're making a lineup change. I'm informing you of that, but do not tell the other coach what the change is." So, they're kind of like meeting the letter of the law, saying that, well, we're making a change, but we don't want that other. And I thought that's ridiculous. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, again, the question always used to be, any changes? Nope. Okay, this is what they've got. Oh, you're making a change. Okay, got it. Okay, now this is what the other side's doing. Because you don't want a situation where the coach makes a decision to make a change based on information that he shouldn't have been told that you told him. And it was happening. I'm not suggesting it was happening a lot, but it was happening.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Daryl. Izzy, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, we had 2 matches on Monday, and both time I told them I'm gonna be on court 1, and both coaches came within 2 minutes. And I think it's important to decide where we're gonna meet, because you don't want the coach telling you, "I didn't find you" in 2 minutes.
Right.
Because Darren was saying that he didn't give them a location, but I really think it's dangerous if the coach gonna try to say, "I couldn't find you" because you did not agree on a place where you're gonna meet.
Yeah, and you predetermined that and told them that in a pre-match.
Yeah, I talked, and both coaches came within 2 minutes. Even if they didn't have a lineup change, they still came.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, to me, you got to have I always think you got to have a plan, and then let them tell you why they think your plan won't work. Don't let them come up with something. At least as a first discussion. Thanks, Izzy. Take a couple more here, guys. William Moore. Hey, William, how you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yep, go loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. My understanding of this lineup change was that we more or less informed the coaches of where they were supposed to meet, but they didn't bring any lineup change to me. I wasn't involved anymore. Is that correct?
It might be, but as a referee in the past, as a referee in the past, you wouldn't check with both coaches before singles, or you'd put it on the responsibility on them to tell you? I'm just asking.
No, they don't tell me at all now, I don't think.
Darren?
Yeah.
Darren, he is correct.
Okay.
We used to get involved with it. They've taken that responsibility from us. It's up to the coaches to exchange their lineup within the 2 minutes. We're not supposed to be getting involved in this.
Right. But I think we need to facilitate this, Steve, is my argument. I'm not suggesting that we dictate anything, but I think we need to act as a conduit.
The facilitation under the rule is that we tell the coaches they have 2 minutes to exchange their lineups, and we're starting within 5. Right. Now, once they exchange their lineups, that's where we get involved in finding out who is getting changed, so we can get our chair umpires out there and actually start within 5 minutes. But I will agree with this gentleman that this stuff of, meet me on court something or whatever doesn't exist in the rule.
Right.
And,
okay.
And while we're on it, because I know a lot of people are going to be coming off here, I want to say just a couple of things before I sign off. One of the most important things of all of this training, whether it's the referee training or the other things that we're doing, whether it be new certification or recertification, the number one complaint from the coaches around the country is that we're inconsistent. And that is one of the things that we're striving in these classes, is to be consistent. What I do on the East Coast, or if I have to go out to Florida, or if I have to go down anywhere, I should be doing the same things that Darren is doing, that Relaford is doing, that Sharon is doing, that some of you are doing. We need consistency, and the only way we're going to obtain consistency across the board is to go by the rule. I mean, earlier with Donna, and I have worked together, and we've had a good relationship when we worked together, and it wasn't anything personal, but my point was, with her, as with some other officials, is it's not up to interpret the rules. It's not up to us to throw our personal feelings into the rule. It's up to us to enforce the rule as the coaches have written it. And now with the third-party appeals, some of you may not be aware, but if you go onto the ITA website and go onto the coaches section, you'll see some of the most recent decisions that have been brought to the attention of the ITA by coaches, and some of them in third parties, which also deals with us. I mean, we can obtain the same complaints. So even if you'll see some on there, most recent, even coaches, when coaches agreed upon themselves to change a rule and the referee went with it, it was overturned. And I don't think any referee on this website wants to be in that situation. So again, even though it sounds harsh and it sounds like there's no gray areas and everything is black and white, well, you do have some discretion, but just be careful on how you use it, because you don't want it to come and bite you. And the only way we're going to get consistency is everybody doing the same thing the same way. Thanks, Darren.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, and I completely agree. Although I think in this case, at the start of the year, I still argue as a referee, you should at least try to be facilitating that. Later in the year, at least the first match or two, it's you got to explain it to them, and then you're right. I mean, William's got a good point. I mean, ultimately it's their match, but what you also though want to avoid major disputes after the fact, where maybe your whatever the term is, ability to do what you got to do to minimize any sort of major dispute after, where you have to make a very difficult decision. So yeah, this will be interesting. We'll see how it works. So Sharon, at Florida State this weekend, you had no issues with anything, or people seem to understand it and
Yeah.
handle it okay? Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's what we want. So okay, we are at 9 o'clock, folks. We're gonna skip over a couple of these, just one or two other things to talk about, and then Al, I will get to your question here in a second. And remember, as what Steve referenced, there are some new forms on the ITA website, as well as ZebraWeb. Remember the emphasis on post-match code violations, and what we mean there are any code violation that you're not able to carry over somewhere. The ITA just is tracking this simply for informational purposes. There's some players out there that feel strongly that if it's not going to be carried over anywhere, that they can do whatever they want. Obviously, that's we don't really want that to happen. So just keep track of that. Anytime you default a player or eject a coach or a player, the ITA would like to know that, and they do follow up with the various schools, conferences, and what have you. So those links can be found on ZebraWeb as well as the ITA website. Okay, as we mentioned, we are at 9 o'clock in the East on behalf of the ITA. and Sharon, Relaford, Steve. I want to thank everyone for joining tonight. This was a lot of really good discussion. Obviously, we have some of the best referees in the country on here, so I did not expect anything less. So good job, everybody. Feel free to stay on as long as you'd like to listen or ask questions, but certainly we will officially end this session right now. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your weekend. But again, feel free to stay on, and I will stay on as long as anyone would like, and certainly Steve, Sharon, Relaford, if you need to jump off, feel free, and thank you so much for your help tonight.
Good job, Darren.
We try. Al Clausen. Hey, Al.
Hey, Darren. Great job tonight. A lot of interesting discussion. I do have one quick question. It's not a real deep one, I think. In the past, it's been my understanding that chair umpires could directly, immediately call throughs. Now,
Okay.
there is the rule that says a chair umpire shall not assist a player in making any call of any kind. And based on what Steve was saying, how we should be taking these rules literally and not changing them, can we still call throughs?
But I believe chair umpires can call foul shots, not ups, and touches, right?
Right, but I'm talking about
Does it
throughs.
say that somewhere?
A through
and
is a fault.
I mean, to me, that's the same. That's a call that you can make from the chair. I mean, that's just my opinion. Just like a ball hitting the ceiling. And thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think it's one we can make.
Yeah. What's your opinion now? Not to put you on the spot. What do you think?
Well, I think it's an important one that we should be able to make. But, I wasn't sure, listening to Steve earlier about how we got to be a little stricter and, going with what the book says. And the book actually, it doesn't say anything in the ITA rules about throughs. Yeah. And throughs are different than not ups. You realize that, not ups and that kind of, and touches and that kind of thing are supposed to be called by the player committing the infraction, whereas throughs are called by the receiver and hopefully the chair umpire. So there is a distinction there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and Steve's spot on a lot of that too. I mean, I think I totally agree with him on that particular statement. But to me, I would think that you would be able to call it.
I think it would be good if they would they ought to put it in writing.
Okay.
So not this question. I mean, I know we've always done it in the past, so I kind of maybe know, but somebody newer to it might say, well,
that's a good point, Al.
Yeah,
Darren,
very good.
Maybe we should insert that into the slides of on the certification slides of what you should and should not call.
Yeah.
Maybe we should throw that in. I'll put it on my slides, but you might want to let Courtney know.
Sure. Okay. Well,
what do you think of that, Relaford?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Put on the slide, yeah.
I mean, Al, if you remember, years ago, the ITA allowed, roving officials in direct observation. They gave them more power out there than it used to be. And I remember that because I remember driving Jane San Diego to teach a class that she was, and she was on the phone with David Benjamin. It took us 4 hours to get there. She was on the phone with David Benjamin for 4 hours talking about this. And that was many, many years ago, because it used to be that as a rover, you basically, you were a statue out there, couldn't do anything. Now in direct observation, you have limited, abilities to do things. So I agree, through should be one of them. We probably need to add that. I don't think we need a vote or anything. It's just a procedure.
By the way, I have one other quick question, if I can squeeze it in here.
Sure. Yeah.
Warm-ups. We're in the indoor part of the season here in North Carolina, and one of our big schools only has 4 indoor courts. So the 5th and 6th singles match, they get up to 10 minutes use balls to warm up. Right. Even Division I, even Division I men. Now the question is, we know what the USTA procedure is if a player flat out refuses to warm up an opponent, and I don't know if the ITA follows that or not. Where they could. Then the other player could have another teammate or a coach come out and warm him up if his opponent won't allow him.
Yeah.
But what has happened sometimes is the 2 players will go out to do their warm up, and one guy, after 3 minutes, I'm done. I've had enough warm up. I'm ready. But the other guy still wants more warm up. So if one guy stops a warm up and the other one still wants to keep hitting, can that other guy have one of his teammates come out to warm him up until he's ready? Or 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, the IT has a specific rule on this that says that you cannot refuse the warm up. You have to warm up your opponent. And there was one team, you know, maybe Sharon, 4 or 5 years ago that was refusing to warm up anybody, and so they added that. And you know, I think it is. Of course, I've looked in the rule book tonight for some stuff and I can't find it, so I might be going crazy. But I know that there's a college rule that says you cannot refuse it.
Yeah. Of course, the thing I was.
But I think if you do refuse, then I think you then give up. If you refuse, then you can't warm up with anybody, and then I think the other person, the opponent, can warm up with the teammate.
Right. Well, that's the USTA provision. Yeah, that's correct. But I know that the ITA, at least, I hope they still do. I don't remember.
It used to be. I know it was in the book at one point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is in the book that they have to warm up. Of course, the situation I was raising was, what if they actually do start warming up? It isn't like the guy flat out said no. Yeah. But he basically is done after about 3 minutes and says, "I'm ready." You know, and the other guy said, "Well, I'm."
Yeah, but the opponent, the other player is entitled to the full 10 minutes.
Yeah,
and that's
where you
consider
the violation of the rule that you have to warm up your opponent. Then what is the penalty? Do you give a code violation even though the match hasn't started?
I would give him a code violation for unsportsmanlike conduct, and then move on from there. I mean, there is. That's my opinion. I haven't had to deal with the situation. Usually when I have early warm-ups, they both decide to stop at the same time. But that other individual is entitled to a warm-up with their opponent for that full 10 minutes. So yeah, to me, it would be an unsportsmanlike conduct.
Okay. So that would be a point when they actually start.
Well, they've already started. Keep in mind, the match has already begun.
Yeah, but when the first game starts, the guy's down a point. Basically, what you're saying.
Correct.
Because of the
correct. Because
he's
being go ahead.
After giving that code violation, if he still doesn't, if he argues with you and he's still not wanting to go out and warm up, then I guess you would go into a second code, or is he can't delay a game because there's no real timing here.
I guess you could, but I have a feeling that once you issue a code violation on a warm up, the coach is going to be there real quick.
Yeah.
And probably is going to resolve the issue. I mean, the other option you can have, instead of dropping the hammer on him right away, because we don't have a cut and dry rule on this, is to get the coach over and say, look, if he doesn't continue warming up, I'm going to code him, and solve it that way. Right. I mean, I'm going the easy route. I mean, I know everything in my world is black and white, and when the rule is written, that's the way it is. But we don't have a cut and dry procedure at this point in time on this. It's something we should probably look into, Al. But sometimes the sugar works a lot better than the hammer, and just say to the player, look. Say to the player, look, you have two choices, and only two. Either you warm up with this player, or I'm going to issue a code violation for unsportsmanlike conduct, and you're going to be down, love 15 or 15, whatever. And if he has anything to say about it, then I just saunter over to the coach and say, look, I've spoken to him. This is the issue. You got about 30 seconds to take care of it, and then we're going to move on. And I'm willing to bet the coach is going to tell him, just get up there and hit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Has that happened, Al, to you at all, or?
I haven't gone into the code on any of this, but I did have it happen.
Okay.
I don't know if it was 2 years ago, where the more of the situation I started with, where they did start the warm up, but one player finished, in a few minutes. Yeah. It's very hot in the indoor there a lot of times, and a few minutes, they don't want to get totally exhausted. Yeah. But another player who's just been sitting, the whole time, he would like a full, more than the 3 minutes maybe that the other guy had.
Yeah.
But they basically were unhappy about it. But all right, if he doesn't want to warm me up, then they didn't push it.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, because again, I think Steve's right on that. I mean, they can't refuse it, and then it's an interpretation of by starting it and then stopping, are they refusing it? And I think there's probably an argument to be made that yes, they still are, because if the other players wants the time, if they don't want the time, then it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would I be doing something? Would I be doing something wrong if I said, okay, then you can have one of your teammates come out and warm you up? Would that be incorrect?
Well, then you're kind of making something up.
Yeah.
They're supposed to. Part of that warm up is to get an idea of what your opponent is like. I mean, that's kind of like a unwritten rule in there. They're supposed to be warming up because the match has already started. You can't insert another player.
Right.
Keep that in mind. I mean,
let me play devil's advocate here. If I refuse to warm up my opponent, and he's been sitting for 10 minutes, or I mean sitting, for the whole match, he didn't play at all, and he only gets 3 minutes of the 10-minute warm up, and then I force him to play, that's putting him at a disadvantage if I don't let him get,
But I think, again, we're into this point of interjecting our thoughts into a rule. You've already flipped a coin. You've given them the balls. The warm-up has begun. The match has begun. You can't switch players. Just like if they have a medical timeout during that warm-up, you can't say, well, I'm going to let it go and I'm going to give you another one during the match, because the match has already begun. You can't insert another player.
Okay.
And once that match has begun, both players are obligated to play by the rules. And one of the rules on the warm-up is they will warm up for 10 minutes.
Up to 10 minutes.
Up to 10 minutes. Up to 10 minutes. And if they don't want to after 5 minutes, then as long as they both agree, that's fine. But they can't insert another player in there, because what happens if I'll go with your devil's advocate. Let's say it's Duke and that's right. You're Virginia Tech, correct? And you have the player from Virginia Tech warming up and injures themselves. And how do you write that down on the other?
No, I'm not. You're right. I was not thinking that they'd already done the toss. I was thinking that the warm up was before the toss.
Okay.
Well, again, and I think that's the responsibility of the referee. They shouldn't be warming up, because the warm up is part of the match. So it's not they warm up for 10 minutes and then flip the coin. Now, we used to do that until this rule was passed this year, where they made it. They interpreted it as they will. They have to have that 10-minute warm up.
Yep.
So,
Thanks, Al. I really appreciate it. We got some other hands. So I'd like to try to jump those guys in. I really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks, Steve. David Harris. Hey, David. Hey, David.
Okay. Just to
there you go.
Just to clarify on this, on a medical time, not a medical time, but the timeout for a bathroom break, Division I men, there is no point penalty for the bathroom break, correct?
Well, if they're using it for the purpose, if they're using it in place of their medical timeout, then they still get the point.
Then that becomes a second point. In the past, it was if they got into an emergency, they could say, I'm going to take my medical timeout and use that as their bathroom break.
Right. Which now, they could in the past. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
So now, do you still only get technically one bathroom break, or could you take your extended bathroom break in the first set, and in the third set, even though it's considered a medical timeout, you're going to the bathroom?
Yeah, good question, David. So remember that, and I'll answer it, but I just want to make sure you understand first thing. Nothing's changed in the ability for a player to use a medical timeout for the purposes of a bathroom in terms of they can do that. They still get the point. They still can use it if they have it. The difference now is they get 5 minutes instead of 3. But what they can do, to your question, is they could take their extended break on a set break, and then if they had to go again, not on a changeover, not on a changeover, well, I guess even on a changeover, they could use their medical time. So they could, in theory, take 2. They couldn't, in theory, take 2 bathroom breaks in that case. They would get the one extended one, and then if it's not on any other time, they could use it as a medical timeout, or they could go on the changeover, and they're on their own time, and then and then of course it's time violations consecutive coming back
But
for
to
being late.
reaffirm what you said, though, if they take the extended bathroom break at the set, they're not losing a point penalty. Correct?
No.
But they
Because
would.
they're
if
entitled
they
to
took
that.
But they would if they took the medical timeout, say at the beginning of the third set.
Right, in that scenario, correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
they're
I've
entitled
never-
to one extended break. So at this point, or whatever they're calling it now. So.
But they could have a total of 2.
They could have, and Sharon jump in too. They could go on probably every changeover if they were back in time, I suppose.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I just meant that they could use both a medical timeout and an extended bathroom break, or going to the bathroom, and they would only receive a penalty on one of them.
Correct. Unless they're back late. Right.
And
correct.
I've never seen this, but how do you handle something in doubles if a guy gets out there and he's got to go to the bathroom? What do they do in doubles?
Good question. I think the thought here is that each player is independent. And we know that in professional tennis, it's different. As a doubles team. But Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, in the past, we would treat each player independent in this regard, or am I?
I do believe so.
Yeah, they're treated independently.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree
But
with
what you're saying is that if I am playing with Darren in doubles, and I need to go to the restroom, that's my one match for the entire dual match.
No.
It's each individual match within a dual match. So if you have a bathroom break in the doubles, you could take another. Now, first off, if it's a one set doubles match, you can't take an extended break because you can only take it on the set break.
Okay.
But no, you could use your medical timeout for. Here's the scenario, David. Good question. You could, if you had to in an emergency in the doubles, you could use your medical timeout for that doubles match for the purposes of bathroom. And if it happened again in singles, you could then use your medical timeout for the singles match for the purposes of bathroom. They're treated separately.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes, I do, and that was very helpful.
I mean, the bathroom breaks, it cracks me up. We never thought we'd spend so much time talking about toilet visits, but these things happen. So anyway, thanks, David.
I think David needs to reevaluate why he would even want to be playing tennis with you as a partner.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, David. Okay, thanks for your patience, folks. We're going as fast as we can. Peter Chen. Hey, Peter.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still confused about how to handle this 9-up change after the double. I'm reading the rule book here.
Yeah.
The time between double and singles. Okay. Any 9-up change must be submitted to the opposing coach through the exchange of the ITA coach's scorebook or 9-up page within 2 minutes of completion of the double. So does that mean we should be out of that 9-up change, after the double, let the coach to handle himself?
I guess the way it reads, you're right. I mean, I actually went back and looked, and in an Italics newsletter, it actually suggested that we should facilitate this. So that's probably where I got that from. But black and white as you read it, I guess as the referee, we're out of this. I would still argue, and I'm happy to, be in the minority that you should, if the coaches are not looking like they have any intention of doing what they're supposed to, I think you got to get them to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, Darren, I like the way you said it. It really is not our responsibility. They're taking it out of our hands. It's the coach's responsibility, but we should facilitate it.
But and the thing is, Peter, you still got to get the information. There's still got to be a little communication, because you got to find out, are you changing anybody?
Yeah, but they say they had to do it by exchanging the coach's scorebook on their page. But how? I don't think they have time to write it down on their scorebook on their page.
Yeah.
They just tell you, oh, I'm going to take my number 5 player out. So what do you do?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, again, it's going to be interesting to see how this works. Maybe I'm making the mountain out of a molehill, and I understand why the ITA wanted to maybe go down this direction, because of the fact that unfortunately there were a few situations where, information that shouldn't have been disclosed was, so they're putting it on the coaches to do it themselves. And you're right, the rule says they exchange scorebooks just like they do before the match. But I think your assumption is legitimate that, the last ball's hit, the coach is going to want to talk to their players. They're going to want to, do what they got to do. They're going to want to have a quick, unless they predetermine it, they're going to want to have a conference with their coaching staff. Then you're asking them to take their scorebook out and write it down, and I mean, that's 120 seconds to do that. That's not going to be easy. So I would say, within reason, certainly don't maybe prompt them too much, but at least be available to facilitate that, because you need the information, not only for maybe the sports info and the match announcer, but you've got officials that need to know who the heck's coming to their court.
Well, I know
you might actually decide to assign different chair umpires based on those changes.
Yeah, we have 2 matches last Saturday, and what I did is I just stand. Luckily, they both coach on the same side and only one call away, so I stand in the middle and I watch my stopwatch. It's about maybe 10 to 2 minutes. I watch. I have not heard from them, so I watch to a coach, and then they say no change, and then I go to the other side and no change. That's it. Yeah. But
yeah.
So it's kind of still confusion to me. What we should do. And if they are not writing down on the scorebook, you just take their word for it. Say, oh, I take my number 5 out.
Well, right? You should also have a copy of those lineups in your pocket, preferably folded.
Well, I do, but they don't give you that. They just tell you, I got my number 4 out.
Right.
So they are not doing by the rule. They have to exchange on the scorebook, we still. Okay, that's all we have to handle.
And the whole thing is, I mean, when I read this rule, is I can see their intent of taking the referee out of the loop.
Yeah, that's right. That's why my interpretation too.
But the problem is, then I think they did a knee-jerk reaction. They wrote something and didn't think it through, or consult with referees or the ITA, because it's going to be difficult. I mean, you have the rule that says you're not supposed to get involved with it, so they're going to make the changes. Now the referee is going to have to go down, chase it down, and then whether it be 4 courts or 6, if it's a number 4 being changed, I mean, it's for these matches to start within 5 minutes is going to be a miracle unless there's no lineup changes. That's the way I'm seeing it. And this is where we as referees need to make note of these things and start informing the ITA, this is not working, we're having a problem. Even though we're out of the loop, there has to be some type of procedure that we're going to use, like the one that Isabel was talking about. They come over and find her, but you're going to have some coaches say, I don't have time for that, because you want my players out there in 5 minutes. Now I have to take this opponent's lineups and go over here and go over there. So until something is really solidified, we're dealing with a fire drill. But that's where we as referees can impart our opinions to the ITA and say, look, this part of it is good that we're not involved. However, we need to change a procedure here. We need to have something that the coaches, the OPCOM will agree with so that we can move on further. I just think that this is going to be it's not going to be a good situation.
Yeah, and again, I stress what Steve said, and I agree with him. I mean, I understand the ITA's direction on this and somewhat support it. I mean, it is kind of nice not to have direct responsibility over this anymore as a referee, but I think at least at the start of the year, that's why I'm arguing that, give them a plan, whatever you decide. Don't let them come up with something because no one's going to remember what they agreed to. If you leave them to themselves to try to agree to it, be reasonable, try to be as close to the court that's finished as possible, and then just by osmosis, you're going to probably get the two coaches to somewhat come together, or shake you off and say we're good. So we'll see. And Peter, I would be, as you do more matches here, I'd be curious as to your experience with that. Feel free to share that because it's going to be good feedback.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, we got a couple more. Mr. Proythan, how are you, sir?
Hey, yeah, you hear me all right?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Quick follow-up on the 2-minute drill. I think the scenario that's going to get people in trouble or cause problems is where somebody that is not in doubles is warming up on a court on the other side of the building because their elbow's been bothering them and they're not sure if they're going to play. And they're still hitting when the doubles is finished. And by the time they get over there to tell coach how they've been feeling, more than 2 minutes have elapsed. And so for my kickoff weekend coming up, I'm going to lay that out for the coaches that if you've got somebody like that, they need to start hitting soon enough so that there isn't going to be a delay of starting the singles or getting the lineup change published to the opposing coaches and everybody else that has to be done. So maybe that's a sensitivity thing that we broadcast that to the other referees, and here's where it could really be a problem for you, and they know how to handle it.
Yeah.
The other thing, going back to indoor courts less than 6 and warming up after, I'm just going to throw this out that maybe because of the no warm up with the opponent before the team match starts, that the 10-minute warm-up once a court opens up should be allowed with a teammate, because the pre-match warm-up is done with teammates. And that way, if somebody only wants to hit for 3 minutes, they only hit with their teammate for 3. The other player that wants to hit for the full 7 or 8 can do that with his teammate, which is exactly what they've done, 2.5 hours before that, before the match starts. So that maybe that language about you must warm up your opponent can be taken out now that there is never any warm up with the opponent in the relevant divisions.
Yeah, in the dual matches. Yeah, that's a good point. So basically split the court and you start the 10 minutes and
you say, interesting. You say, all right, this number 5 singles match is going to start at 2:15. It's 2:05 or 2:06 right now. We're going to start at 2:15, and you have this amount of time to warm up with your teammates, just like you would have done at the beginning of the match that started at noon.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting concept. Yeah, I mean again, they had a different interpretation this year, and like Steve had mentioned, where they're now saying that the match starts then, so they'd have to, come off that. But my first thought is I kind of like that. I think that makes it consistent with all other dual matches within the individual matches within that dual match.
Yeah, exactly. There never is a warm up with the opponent, but now in this hybrid situation, you have to warm up your opponent, and then all sorts of gamesmanship could be happening.
And thank you, Vince. I was hoping we would fit in hybrid sometime tonight. I like that. Well done.
Okay. Well, how about this? Were you hoping that somebody would say, "I have to pee, so I'm going to take a toilet break now"?
I already did, my friend. Thank you.
All right. See you down the road. Good night.
Thanks. Good to talk to you. Yeah, that's it. I mean, Steve, Sharon, Robert. I mean, that's interesting. Obviously, that'd be a change in methodology from what they just did, but there might be some potential there to discuss that. But kind of like that idea. Well done. Thoughts on that?
No, it's a good idea. I think they're not going to get another way to do it. That that person that's kind of denied the warm up should be able to warm up completely.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple more, at least on the hand side. Mr. Conway, how are you? You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep. How are you, sir?
Good. Just a couple of quick questions on the lineup changes.
Great.
One, I think we're involved anyway because in 2 minutes, it's my clock that's timing the 5 minutes.
Right.
So what I do.
Can I interrupt you real quick? I think that's a great point, and that's one I actually have used. Sharon, not to put words in her mouth, but Sharon is always very vehement about this. Is ultimately you are the authority. It's your clock.
Right.
Nobody else's. And Sharon, I hope I'm saying that right. So I think that's an excellent point.
So
now don't abuse it. I'm not suggesting you wait 3 minutes and then start it, but it's your authority. Go ahead. Sorry.
So what I'm getting at is I'm just going to tell the coaches when I start the 5 minute clock, I'll yell out 4 minutes remaining, 3 minutes remaining, and when I hit 3, that's it.
Okay.
But so at least they know they've lost the time. And two, I think the lineup changes themselves are from the coach's point of view, they write down their 10, 12 players in order of ability in the scorebook. Right. And if they scratch number 5, everybody else moves up. They don't have to do much.
Yeah, they just have to cross a couple of names off. Yeah, it's not going to be recreating the wheel, but it's still going to require them to do something.
Yeah, but it's from our point of view that we have the trouble of, who do we assign, blah, 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 and getting the names. So they thought about it from their side, but not our side.
Yeah. And we'll adjust. I mean, for example, I know when there was no warm-up, some of the officials that have been doing a while said because we actually use the warm-up to warm ourselves up, and, which is correct. I mean, you use the warm-up as an official to warm up. You're warming up for the match too, but I think most of us have adjusted to not, having a warm-up. So it'll probably be the same here. Players adjust, officials adjust. I understand the intent. I think we can help the coaches and the ITA get to where they want to based on the intent, but I still think we need to be a little bit involved. I know it says we're not. I don't see how you can't be involved somewhat.
Right.
One, you're keeping the time. So
why are we counting backwards?
We're counting down to 0. We give them 5 minutes.
They have 5 minutes. They have 2 minutes to change their lineups. You must start the matches within 5. How are you going to start the matches within 5 if you count down to 0?
Well, at 0, they have to be on the court and ready to play.
When did you do your 2 minutes?
Well, if you're counting down, it's, you start at 5 o'clock, there's 4 minutes remaining, 3 minutes remaining, 2 minutes remaining, it just goes down.
Yeah.
When are they changing their lineups, and when are you taking care of that?
They have to do it
I'm just curious.
At 3 minutes remaining, they have to have changed their lineups. They have that first 2 minutes.
Okay. I just wanted your thought process on counting backwards.
No, at the pre-match meeting with the coaches, I tell them, I'll count down the 5 minutes, and when I hit 3 minutes remaining, no more lineup changes.
Yep.
Okay, good. No, I was doing some typing here, and I didn't know if I had missed that procedure. Yes. I missed something there. That's all. That's why I was asking. But thank you.
Oh, not a problem.
Lawrence, can you talk to Laro offline and have him see the light of being a Patriots fan? I'm really, come on. Can you talk to him about that, please? God's
Sure,
team,
no,
as you like to call it. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right.
And Mr. Citrone, how are you, sir? Thanks for your patience.
I'm doing well. Yes. We had a scenario at Florida State this weekend. FAMU only had 4 players that they showed up with for it was a tournament we were running for the duels that they were playing. In one of the matches, they were playing a team and they had 8 players listed in their singles lineup. They ended up pulling 2 players and then realized that another one of their players wasn't going to play, and he was listed at 4. That player that wasn't playing, so they pulled their number 4 now, and essentially didn't have anyone at 6.
Mm-hmm.
The question came up: when does the forfeit from Florida A&M, who only showed up with 4, actually become official? Does it?
Yeah, Roger called me. We had a long discussion about this last night. We talked about the World Darts Championship first, and then we talked about this.
I don't know which one was more exciting.
I think World Darts, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, this actually happened, I believe, at Syracuse last year, where a team didn't have enough players and the other team mismanaged a situation so bad to try to get what they thought were the right players to get match experience that they ended up not having a number 6 player because they pulled players out of the lineup and what have you. And actually, the ruling with the conference was that it's an unplayed match. It's a no contest. But I think, in this scenario, I mean, obviously, the coach knows there's only 4 players. He's probably going to want his very last player in the lineup. Here's a chance to get him some experience, right?
Right.
Because I'm probably going to win the match. All I got to do is win 1 doubles and 1 singles that are actually playing, and I win. Because if I win the doubles point, I'm up 3-0.
Yeah.
But the problem is if there's not 2 players listed below him on the official lineup, then you really can't move him up to 4, and you got to have physically able players technically listed at 5 and 6, and then you get into lineup, movement issues and.
That's one of the things I mentioned earlier. It's almost similar to what went to the appeals board. Coaches changing their players, jumping more than 1, and
right.
So the entire match was nullified. That's the one that's on the website. I don't know if that's the same one you're talking about.
No.
But it wasn't. It went all the way to it was, and ironically, it was through a third-party coach.
Right. No, I'm well aware of that one. This was actually a different one. I think the whole world's aware of that one, but yeah, I mean, if you want to get really technical, then what I always tell in those scenarios, what I always would tell a coach, if asked, is list everybody that you got, and then after the doubles,
But that is the situation. He did list everyone he had. He listed his 8 people that he had, and then he went and pulled 2. And then as a player informs him he's not going to play, he is somewhat hurt and he'd rather not play, so he pulls him as well. And then after the fact realizes he only has 5. Now he technically only has 5 players listed that are on the lineup sheet because he's pulled 3 of them.
Yeah.
And so what just is the agree? Are we kind of all in agreement then that it officially becomes after the lineup changes are submitted? So technically he only has 5 players, so no one would get credit for the 6.
If push came to shove, and Corey Brooks jumped off, he, obviously he'd be the one of the ITA that would be dealing with that issue if it ever came formal. To me, unfortunately, that's a no match.
Yeah, and I mean, what happened was the Nebraska coach actually brought it to the attention while singles was still going on, and if he hadn't, probably the match gets stopped once that one singles match finishes.
Right.
Not everyone's in agreement, all the coaches, and FAMU's fine with the loss and accepts it, but like you said, another team could appeal it later on in the season if for some reason it
Yeah.
had some sort of implication. Thankfully, he brought it up, and so two singles matches were finished, and that got you to the 4 points. But I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's
it
the
has
good,
to go to
good
court.
faith here. I mean, in good faith, the opposing coach, normally in good faith, the opposing coach will inform the other coach even before they submit lineups. Hey, I've only got 4 guys, or even before they even travel. Hey, I've only got 5 guys today, or 4 guys, and not always, but sometimes they'll do that. And then that coach has the ability to formulate their lineup based on that. But they still, whether we like it or not, they still have to have a physically able player listed on that line, whether it's their original lineup or based on all the substitutions that they made. There still has to be an actual physically able to play player on that line. Now, in this case, maybe the player was sort of hurt, but certainly you're not going to make that determination as a referee.
Right.
And he's there, and the only thing that could affect him is if he's actually their number 3 guy and he's listed him at 8 for the purposes of, because I know I'm going to pull him out and I really want my 9 guy to get experience. That's a hard one, because and I understand what the coach is trying to get, here's a chance to get some other guys some matches, but technically still the lineup rules apply, and the movement rules if someone really wanted to push it. I mean, it doesn't sound like in this scenario that,
No, this scenario wasn't like the 2 teams playing. It would be another team coming in and looking at it and appealing.
Right. Yeah. Which, trust me, people look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Now, doesn't mean it's going to be overturned, though. I mean,
right.
Again, not to put myself in that room, but I mean, even if they protest it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be upheld.
Right.
I mean, in this case, the coach could have said, well, this was my intent based on all the facts I had. And maybe some people go, okay, we understand, and we dismiss it. The scenario I think that Steve was talking about, there was some other stuff at play there. So, and in that case, the NCAA actually made the decision, not the ITA.
Okay.
But yeah. No, that's an interesting scenario. Roger had a good talk about it last night. Okay. Let me unmute him here, Mr. Pennington. Oh, he muted himself, so probably the first time ever. No, just kidding. Okay, thanks, Chris. How are you doing? Everything good?
Yes,
Okay.
everything's great.
Good.
Thanks.
We got some dedicated people here. All right. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to ask or talk about, or maybe the winning lottery numbers for tomorrow? I'm happy to take those from you. Take that off your hands. Thanks, Anand. Good to see your name, my friend. Have a great start to the season. Okay, did we get most of those questions answered, guys?
Everybody's just kind of saying goodbye now.
Okay, great. Well, thank Sharon, Relaford, Steve. Thank you so much for
good night, guys.
For hanging out. Relaford, good luck this week at Daytona.
Thanks.
Mr. Buys, good to see your Ms. Hinshaw. Good to see your name here. So, Mark Raines, Mary Lynn Baker. Wow, what a crew! Jeez, Louise. Vince Pierre. All right. The legends. Okay, well, everybody, on behalf of the ITA, thanks so much. Had a lot of good discussion that we didn't get to everything, but that's okay. There will be another one of these on the 30th that Anthony will be kind of leading. So if there's room and you want to go ahead and jump on that. This was also recorded. I think probably after the 30th, Courtney will send out a link to the recording of one of the 2. So, all right, everyone, have a great evening. Have a great start to the year. And if anyone can be of any assistance, please let us know. And I look forward to working with some, if not most of you, at some point this season. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.